Good to go? Okay. I call this Tuesday, December 17th, 2024 Planning and Zoning Work Session to order at 6 o'clock. And tonight is a work session on 3 topics. We're going to cover proposed marijuana establishment regulations, accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs, and building height. And our goals are to review the preliminary drafts of proposed code changes for marijuana establishments, accessory dwelling units, and building height, and recommend any additional edits. And commissioners will provide input on which drafts will be presented to City Council at the joint work session on January 27th. So let's start out with a little overview by administration. Would that be good? On marijuana establishments?
Sure. Well, I can give you to just confirm. I think I've shared with the commission, but to the public, that the joint work session has officially been confirmed. It will be January 27th, 5:30 p.m., which is a Monday. It will occur before their city council meeting that day, and so yeah, this is an opportunity for the commission to kind of make any last minute or have any last minute discussions before we go in there. I think at some point either we can do this today or we do have another work session if we want to kind of wait and see where we end up and do it at the next work session, but have some sort of framework, since we're the ones requesting that meeting, like how we are going to present that information, whether that's, you want us to kind of do the bulk of that, or we can provide a framework. And since the official recommendations are coming from you, if some of you want to participate in that process, I think that would be good to at least figure that out either again today or at the next work session. But yeah, I'll let Courtney kind of run through, because she kind of put together the packet on the marijuana establishments. But before she does that, I'd just give you all a heads up, and you probably see him, but Jeremy Rogers is our building inspector for the city, and he graciously gave us his time tonight to be a part of the ADU and building height discussion. So he's available resource.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Courtney.
So the marijuana establishment proposed code language is drafted from the discussion we had, I think, 2 work sessions ago, and the edits are primarily addressing the definitions, then the land use is allowed, which encompasses some verbiage that's placed above the table, land use allowed table in the code. And then, of course, the land use is allowed table. So this is what kind of the initial thoughts and what I gathered from all of the conversation in our last work session. Feel free to now change it and modify it as you see fit, now that you can see it in written form.
Okay, I'd like to mention is there a handout for the public on my laydown? We probably should have that. Would it be possible to get a copy for the audience?
Yeah, we could probably go print off some right now.
Was that in the packet? Is it?
No, I had to email to everybody because you guys have laptops.
Sorry.
Clara did this morning.
Okay. Let me see.
Just 2.
Part of our paperwork reduction, although I'm a violator of that. But I did provide a laydown. I went through this draft ordinance pretty thoroughly and found a few significant changes that I'd like to make. But I guess we should proceed, and when she comes, you'll be able to follow along as well.
Chair Griswold, I'd like to comment too, is I really like the fact that you included the statute and the administrative code on there too, because a lot of people won't, if they want to do this, that will simplify their research on that, so they're not having to flip through code and statute, because that can be a little bit, cumbersome at times for people. So I think it's great that you had.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
We also have the Alaska Administrative Code, and we have Alaska Statutes.
Yeah.
And then we have that whole thick marijuana and alcohol board.
Mhm.
They're all kind of mixed into this regulation pot.
It's a little convoluted.
Yeah. So for me, that was really important reference. Because well, where did I get that? And I can just click on it and off I go.
Mhm.
So it only takes up a little extra room, and I think it is a valuable
It looks like you
reference.
used Juris as your reference. I think the,
They pretty much pop
It
up
just-
at the top.
yeah,
of
just,
Google,
where of that, yeah,
in case text pops up.
yeah.
But I found they've been pretty reliable.
Yeah, I've used Touch and Go before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, how would the commission like to proceed? Would you like to go through my laydown and compare it to what we have and just see how you like it?
I would. I think it's a good add-on because you don't delete too much at all from what the administration's done. You've added for clarity, I think, and I think that would be a
Right.
good one.
Right. And where it was the same, I started it out and then just went
Right.
dot, 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 so we don't have to
Mhm.
read it all again.
So your edits
Go ahead.
are all in blue, those are all ads on this laydown.
Correct.
Right.
Do you want to do like a brief summary of those ads?
As we go through it?
Or just like right now, like what,
Shoot.
I know there's a lot of different stuff going on, but just kind of,
A brief summary is I tried to make it more complete, like the definition was only half of what the state statute says. And I thought that was important to include the whole thing, so we know not only what is marijuana, but what is not marijuana. And that's part of their reasoning too. They have a pretty succinct paragraph. First part is what's in our code, proposed code now, and then my deal is include the whole thing, just like the state statute, so we know what is and what's not. And I just think that clarifies it.
okay.
Rather than trying to summarize, I think we should just go through it because they're kind of individually unique. So as we go through, does that make sense to the commission? Do you like keeping the entire description that the state statutes use?
For me, I did, because it certainly expanded it, because if you just have the one definition and you have to refer back to the state statute or the administrative code, then it's problematic. But if it's all right there, then you can pick it apart if you need to.
Okay,
I agree.
okay.
Sorry, so
You have consensus?
you,
What? Okay.
I was gonna say, just to clarify, so you took the definition from the state statutes and just made sure they were matching in our code?
Correct.
Okay, but that does save time. You can skip those as you go through if the commission's in agreement that that's the format they'd like, we can move forward with those.
Yeah, I mean, one option would be to like see state statute, but that's not appropriate.
It's hard.
That's what I have found trouble with before. You look at that and you have no idea what it is, and it's another step to try to understand what our code means. So just put it there, there it is.
Yeah, there's that fine line between putting too much and not putting enough where people have to hunt it down themselves and then it never gets hunted down correctly.
I don't know, like
Just
just,
to paint the other side, just because I'm
Yeah,
guessing
yeah.
this is why it was done that way, is if we refer to the Alaska statutes, anytime they change, our code is still compliant with them. If you spell out the definitions in our code, anytime the statutes change, I'm guessing we would need to go in and edit our code to reflect that.
Wasn't there a statement somewhere that addressed that? I can't think of the wording right now.
Might be a good clerk question. We can follow up
Right.
with them on that. 'Cause
Right.
I could see that being,
Right, I
like,
think
we could just, something could change and we don't catch it,
I
and then all of
know.
a sudden our code's out of date.
Right.
So,
And if they revised Alaska Statute 0305-100, it might still be under that, so it'd still be correct.
Okay.
But we could ask the clerk for a
clarification
phrase.
on that.
that
I mean,
would
is
keep us
there
current.
a relationship with our code and the state statutes where they're already kind of like, it seemed like you mentioned like the state statutes are included, or?
So if we just put like the state statute in our code, then we just adopt the state statute. And if the state statute changes, our code would then adopt the change because we're referencing the statute, not the language.
And any town in Alaska would have to follow the state statute.
Yep.
So, I don't know, like the first one, just to say marijuana does not include, like, you know, a definition of what not, I don't know. That one's like kind of questionable to me.
That's what they're wording. This is not my wording.
But you know what I mean? Like, how do you feel about, like, including in a definition what the definition isn't? You know what I mean?
Instead of saying what it is.
Yeah.
I just like to keep it clean. This is the state statute. We already have the first half in our proposed code, and I'm just proposing to make it complete for
Yeah, but
understanding.
I hear that. But like the state statute, you know, there's that every town has to follow, you know. So it's already in a code,
Yes.
you know, that's governing
Yes.
use and stuff. I don't know, I think of space, but
I'm not worried about space. It's all on your computer.
I think that if somebody's gonna read through this, an individual's gonna read through, it's nice for them not have to look up a state statute
go to a
for a
second source.
definition. I think sometimes it makes sense to look up something that's dealing with the state, but other times if it's definition,
Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to say, anyone in the audience, you're welcome.
I think in this case, it would be appropriate to define what marijuana does not include, because from leaving the last work session with this topic, there was some unknowns, at least for myself, of how does, especially when talking about manufacturing products, how does this affect hemp or CBD or any of those things? And so I think including the definition of what it does not include is important, especially when there's other products available from the plant.
It's a very complex topic. So the more clarity we can have, I think, the
I
better.
think the way it's worded, as defined by Alaska statute, and you give the definition, I'm hoping that if the statute were to change, changing the definition would just be more housekeeping versus having to go through a whole
Exactly.
public hearing
The
process.
intent is to follow the code, so it's housekeeping.
Yeah, so we'll follow up with Chris and the clerk's office on that.
Right.
Chairperson?
Yes.
In response to her, you have that noted on your first page, 54, what it does not constitute.
Right, so that's the complete, she was in support of that, that's the complete definition.
Oh, do you
of
have
code.
that, a copy of it?
Yeah.
Did you see
yeah,
that?
Clear. Yeah, clear.
And you're
so
good with
the
that?
blue, and my understanding is the blue is what you are recommending.
Correct.
to add.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just giving
Endorsing
comment
that.
in support based on how I left last work session.
Okay, let's move on. Marijuana establishment is just the same, except I wanted to list all the uses that are listed in the land uses allowed table in the same alphabetical order under number 55 and renumber. So that's coming up. So page 6, list the limited and standard cultivation facilities separately in alphabetical order. And the reason I want to separate, right now the code just says, the draft code just says standard cultivation facilities. But in our land uses allowed table, it's separated out.
With limited.
So I think we should have each one have its own line everywhere. So the definition, standard and limited would have their own entry, because that's what's reflected in the land uses allowed table.
Yeah, I think a lot of these changes are pretty straightforward. Probably don't need to go through in
Good.
so much
Do you want
detail.
to
We
beat
could
them
just
up too
pick
much?
out, just pick out the ones that maybe
Okay.
commissioners have questions
Okay,
on.
so I'm going to put little checks by A and B, and the pattern you'll see is marijuana establishment, comma, and then cultivation facility limited, cultivation facility standard, and that way they show up alphabetically in the land uses allowed table, which makes it much easier to research. On the next page, on my page 2, marijuana establishment product manufacturing, I had a little discussion with Commissioner Charbonneau, and he suggested, to be consistent, that we, instead of say hazardous materials, say heavy. And then the next one, heavy use, the next one is light use. And then we could just use the same heavy industrial use as we have in our code. And that'll just be real consistent.
That'd be good, because I had a question about hazardous, because not everything in that list under C is considered hazardous, it's noxious.
Right.
And that would fall up underneath the noxious stuff, more so under light, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah, so I
So
think.
for consistency, let's just
Yeah.
make that switch. So we'll use the same definition, heavy use, for this type of marijuana establishment, product manufacturing.
What would you read the title? I'm sorry, Chair Griswold. What would you-
Marijuana establishment, product manufacturing,
Heavy. Okay.
heavy use. The next one is da-da-da, light use.
Right.
And the next one is retail store. Kept that the same, but I just moved it to alphabetical location. Next one, F, is marijuana establishment, retail store with on-site consumption endorsement, indoor. And I ran out of time to define that, but that will be in our land uses allowed table. It's pretty self-explanatory, but there's probably a definition that's not circular.
Yeah, and we can look in
Plug that in.
AMCO regulations,
Right.
whatever, see if they have it already defined, just put that there.
Right, I just ran out of time. And the next entry in the land uses allowed table is marijuana establishment, retail store with on-site consumption endorsement, outdoor. The next one is the retail walk-up or drive-through exterior window pickup. And this is not a definition, so maybe you could find a definition for that too,
Yeah, I mean,
under H.
and the part that isn't the definition, do we want that in the land uses allowed portion of code?
All
Maybe that?
these are marijuana establishment uses, and so they should all be listed in the land uses allowed table.
Yeah, but that, the sentence you have on after letter H
Mm-hmm.
is more like a land use regulation versus a definition.
So maybe
So
that
just
could go
move
under
that.
big capital H, where we have further information. Yeah, I would think that would be a better place for it. And then the last entry, I, is a marijuana testing facility, which was already part of the draft, but I just put it in alphabetical order. So is that all good with everybody? It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Okay, moving on to definition number 56. I added marijuana personal use, and this should, I believe, appear in the land uses allowed table. It's allowed outright.
Yeah, that
Where
was,
people
from the
live.
discussion we had last time, was left uncertain. There was
Mhm.
debate amongst the commissioners of whether or not it should be included, so that's why it's not in this draft.
It's a, I think it's, marijuana use is not well understood, and I think this is real educational, that in Alaska, the local government may not prohibit the personal use and possession of marijuana and marijuana products, da-da-da. It's quite extensive what you can do, personal use. And so it's a use of marijuana that people will probably want to know how that fits into our code. Can I do this or not? And what zones can I do it in?
So you're gonna have to create a land use table for that marijuana.
Yeah, I
This
don't
was
know
not-
about
Just
that.
another entry.
Entry
It'd
down
be the
below.
last one,
Mhm.
marijuana, personal use.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Not actually the last one.
I don't know if we need personal use
You're
in
gonna,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
Then you're gonna have.
Because it doesn't have to do with anything with our code.
Yeah.
You
People
know?
go into R1, R2, R3s all over the town, wherever
Yeah.
their private spaces are.
I think we should leave it out because it's
Yeah.
state mandated and it's not a code that we have. We don't have a code
I
saying,
don't think it's our.
you know, where it can be. That's more like a federal, excuse me, not federal, but a
The
state.
federal can do it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a state regulation, so.
Okay.
It sort of begs the question a little bit. I don't know, but unless you can say personal use, see definition or something, so
Yeah, I
you
think
considered it
that's
or
too much.
something.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if that's too much or an overkill on that, but, you know, because everything else is so checked back and forth, and then all of a sudden you have this
Okay.
nothing. I don't know the best way to present it, but
Okay.
And
Well,
someone wondering
I
what
take
the
it out.
personal use is, they go to the Alaska state statutes, right? Like,
can say
that document, that code is, you know, a separate
Yeah.
Okay.
important thing, like another source that can be go-to. I mean, I liked your point about having, you go in our code and this, you could get everything right here, but I think there is,
Okay.
for some
I'm happy to take it out.
of these topics where you get the primary source to go to would be the state statutes.
So you're saying to take it out altogether,
Right.
56
Yeah.
completely?
Let's
Good,
just
so
take
it's
it
either,
out.
it's either or,
I don't think it
good,
needs to be
I get it,
Let's
totally
take
get
it
it,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
That makes good sense.
Okay, thank you for that input. And then the last one is marijuana products, and I just put that in its alphabetical order. Okay, page 6 to 7 of the original, and continuing page 2 of my laydown. So this is just more of a clarification, because we're dealing with so many different codes. We have ACC, we have 3AAC or whatever, so I wanted to put in SCC section before 1510-140. So it's real clear that this is our Seward City Code. And then instead of just saying with table 1510-225, say SCC, land use is allowed table, da-da-da. So let's just make it real clear whose code that is.
And a question with number 2,
Yes.
where it talks about residential districts.
Oh, are we on the next?
Oh, did we already do
Oh, sorry. Number 2.
Yeah.
Page 3?
Yeah, page 3.
Okay, so
number
we're gonna
2.
move on from that simple, just
Yeah.
identify whose code it is, it's our code.
Sorry, I
Okay,
jumped ahead.
okay, now we're on page 3 of the handout, and you have the floor.
Yeah, I just had adding that 500, you got the 500 feet up here talking about the various structures, types of structures that you have the distance from, and then it goes into residential district and labels the zones. Now that distance, it just says residential district zones. I'm assuming that's from that's not state, is that state mandated? And if it is it from the edge of, where is that exactly measured from? 'Cause
No,
it
I don't
seems very
think
vague.
that was
It
a
goes on.
recommendation from the commission's discussion, so it's not state mandated.
Okay.
So it does go on to say, specifies that it must be measured by the shortest pedestrian route from the public entrance of the building in which the licensed premises would be located to the outer parcel boundaries of the school, recreation, youth facility, main entrance, do service.
But the zone,
But then when it goes on, it says, or I guess it's just, maybe it's just the way it's worded that, maybe I'm the only one that.
So you're saying,
that?
yeah, it's confusing. Are
Yeah,
we saying that it's not allowed in the residential districts, or that it's not allowed within 500 feet of the
and
residential?
then where do you mark?
and where
to
do you
measure
mark
to?
that? Yeah,
Right.
That's a good question.
like is it where on the, like if it's to the residential and you've got auto block this way and some R1 over here, you're going from the door, like, the establishment, but then where does that meet the R1?
Where does the zone begin?
Yeah, is it just the closest
Walking
Structure.
distance.
walking, is it the structure?
It
or is it
says
the closest-
pedestrian route.
So you can't go behind alleys or
It
behind
says
people's
shortest
yards or through
pedestrian
easements.
route.
But like, so you start at the store,
Yeah.
and then where do you end, Carol?
Where do you end?
Yeah,
Yeah.
measuring that
When you're
500.
going to a
Two.
zone.
2, I mean, the only change I made to this was that community, so maybe you should direct it to them, because this isn't my
Oh,
wording.
okay.
Okay.
So,
Well, the residential districts, RM, R1, R2, R3, UR, OR, was the input from the last work session, so if that's confusing, then let's just strike it, because that was,
That was recommended by the
yeah,
council,
I didn't
by
put
the
that- I
commission.
didn't
That
put
was
that
the
in there.
commission's
That was-
recommendation.
Yeah.
We've confused ourselves.
well, I think the public
That's good.
was,
Check back on.
I think the public was speaking that they didn't, if I remember correctly, they didn't want marijuana establishments in these particular zonings, is what I understood from the meeting. But then this makes it seem like it's a walking distance to those, not
Yep.
just in them.
which in the land uses allowed table takes care of the zoning districts.
So we don't need it here.
Yeah, seems like just
So
strike it.
are
So
we in
we're-
agreement to strike the RM, R1, R2, R3, UR, OR? Should we strike that?
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah, because if we're not allowing them in the land use allowed area, then I don't know if it just
Okay.
it's confusing.
Okay.
You know, it is so, there's just so much listed out here. I wonder, why don't you just say marijuana establishments can be located in such as, you've listed out so much that they can't be. It says they can only be here as opposed to where they can't be. I don't know if that's a doable thing either. I don't know, because it just seems,
We're gonna have to have distances on some things.
Yeah.
you know. It seems okay if we get rid of that to me. 'Cause
Yeah, I
the
mean,
rest- Sorry.
I agree if it's already listed in the land use table, you don't need to list it here,
Mhm.
be a little redundant.
And the
Yeah,
rest
but
of
some,
the-
some things do need some
Yeah.
specificity.
This paragraph is established distance
Yeah,
for all of them,
yeah.
and I think we should just leave it at that.
yes.
The foundation of that is in the AMCO
Correct,
Okay,
document.
correct.
Yeah.
And we as a local government can make it more strict. That's why we were able to add park
1,000.
and community center and whatever. We can add, they didn't include park in their restrictions.
And didn't we include the 1,000, didn't we put the 1,000 feet in there? I think we added that.
I forget, but
I think that was added.
yeah, you can make
We
it, some,
increased it by
some,
1,000 feet for those particular areas.
some communities choose 500 feet, but we chose 1,000.
okay. Yeah, so that deals with the distance.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So are we just striking the zones?
Yep,
Correct.
residential
Right.
districts are in RM, R1, R2, R3, UR, and OR.
So we're just striking those, okay.
Yeah.
So they can be within 500 feet of them,
Well, yeah, but they're not allowed.
Right.
in them,
Yeah.
but it's 500 feet from them.
Yeah,
Correct.
So there's a little difference there.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
Right, that's a good clarification.
but we don't know how to measure it, and, yeah.
I'm okay with just having them not in them. Because a lot of other,
Yeah, so do you want to
Criteria.
keep them 500 feet away, you know?
no, I'm okay with striking this and leaving it in the land use that they're not allowed in those zones.
Okay,
Yeah, just completely.
Yeah,
so we're okay, by striking them, we're okay with retail stores, marijuana establishments being within 500 feet of the zoning districts listed. Are we? Yeah, okay.
Because there's other criterias that, uphold certain areas that we don't want.
Right.
Here. So I think
It's hard to do, it's hard to do to a zone, all the other things are like specific
Yeah.
buildings, I think. So, yeah.
I believe a typical city block is 600 feet, although we have variations because we have so many old subdivisions. But 600 feet is roughly a block, so it'd be the end of
Okay.
your block.
There probably aren't too many places where it could even be possible. So-
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had testimony on that, how hard it was to find a place.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, moving on to number 3. Use or consumption of marijuana in public is prohibited by law in the code. That just seemed to be a useful thing to know.
Now, are we going along the same route as the one we struck about personal use?
Well,
Because,
personal use was in
Use.
a different category. We're now under H, which is land use is allowed. Which has, if you remember, vendors, all this stuff, transient merchants. So this is a place where we can have more specificity, and it's come up, in fact, from one of our commissioners, it's like, can you have marijuana on the bike path? Can you do it here or there? Well, actually, by law, it's prohibited to use or consume marijuana in public. So that's that. And I spared you the definition of public because it was quite, it's very technical how public means. So is that okay? Well, actually, I didn't spare it, I put it in parentheses here, just so you would know, but I didn't think it was necessary to put all of that.
So the in parentheses, that in public definition would
That's
not
just,
appear?
no,
That's our add-on.
that's just for you
Gotcha.
to benefit from my research. So is that okay to keep that note
Yeah.
in there?
That's good, I think.
Okay,
Where are we talking?
we're on page
Number
3. Number
Item 3.
Oh, page 3.
Yeah, we're just talking about this.
Oh, okay, got it.
it's a law, not a code. That's what I was wondering
Yeah.
about.
I mean, do we list alcohol as not consuming in public
I
for
don't know.
bars and
That's what I'm concerned about. It's a lot on a code,
It's helpful,
It is
is it
helpful.
appropriate?
but I don't know if it needs to be there.
I don't know.
I like it, it's just one sentence.
We have somebody in the audience.
Oh, go ahead.
Along those same lines, I mean, I thought it would be helpful to include the personal use definition, and you struck that out. And so if you follow that same line of thinking, that it's not code, then it probably should be struck out. If you keep it for clarification for users, then you should probably put the other definition back of personal use.
Consistency.
Well, this, I just want to make sure we're not, this is code, and somebody who's looking at this is going to be wanting to do something related to code. Not necessarily, I mean, I wouldn't say not necessarily to law, but they should already know the law, and I don't think we need to tell them law in code. Code is there to tell our code that we enforce as a city. Because we don't put all of the other laws that you can't do in our code.
Well, I feel marijuana is a new use in our town, in fact, in Alaska. And when this came up before council before, there was a lot of ignorance about what it was and what would be happening and what you could do and what you couldn't do. And I think some of the regulations that were passed reflected that ignorance. And so I don't mind having a little bit more information, especially since I spared you that 8-line definition of public.
I mean, could that appear differently, like maybe at the end, like additional information? Is that just where it's real, everything that is added that is law is kind of all in one spot as like info? I mean, that is a good point about marijuana being a new use and, you know, providing information, being helpful with a new thing. But I just wonder, and this, I don't know, but I think this is a good question as far as like, what goes into code? What is appropriate to even code? Can you even do this, you know?
So, to be consistent, again, if we're going to keep 3 and 3 on page 3, then you can abbreviate 56 on page 2 the same way, to read the same way, right? You don't have to have all that detail there. You could just have it reference the statute, Alaska statute, right? So you just abbreviate that, and like you have abbreviated number 3 on page 3. Is that okay?
Are you referring to personal use on
Yeah.
page 2?
Yeah, and you, actually, in use of consumption of marijuana, isn't that the same 3? Is that the same? No, it's a different
Right. So you
statute.
can eat
But
it,
anyway, it's still,
smoke it.
I mean, at least it's giving them a place to go to find that out.
Yeah, but this isn't an information packet on, it's an information packet on code only. You know, and not Alaska state law or city state law. I mean, we're supposed to be dealing with code.
Christiana, did you have?
Yeah, it's my understanding, and I don't know fully, but it's my understanding that in the state of Alaska, personal use of small amounts has been legal in Alaska for a while, where the recreational purchase of marijuana is newer.
Right.
And so, you know, the two things that are kind of being discussed right now in law is probably known or easier to understand or obtain. So again, that's just my comment of
Okay.
understanding that there's two differences,
Right.
right? We're talking about the recreational retail and not personal use, and I think that the two are kind of beginning to meld, and I'm not sure it's necessarily like Commissioner Chavernov has
Okay.
been trying to clarify.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree. That's, information is great, and I think people should have it, but we're just talking about code. So I don't want to muddy this, document with laws when we were just talking about code.
Okay.
So does
So
that,
let's strike number 3 on page 3.
okay, and then what about 57, marijuana products? We skimmed over that. Do we have to list products too?
57, just a second. What page are you on, please?
Page 2?
It's personal use that you're referring to.
57, I didn't change that from the draft.
56 or 57.
From the what?
On page 2, number 57,
Right. but-
I did not change anything, so I didn't. I didn't.
So that
spell
R,
it
what
out.
is it? What is it?
Well,
what is
that
it
goes
specifying?
back, these are just my changes to the draft code.
So if you look in the packet,
So the packet,
you
yeah,
can- you kind of have to use the packet and then Chair Griswold's lay down hand in hand, because
the ones that were the same, I just didn't want to waste the ink on it.
Oh, okay, I
The
just,
blue is in addition to our packet.
Yeah.
true, okay.
You just changed the
So, for
number,
example,
right?
it says,
So we need to define marijuana products because they're being sold.
so
correct.
this is the definition in the packet. Marijuana products, number 56. Concentrated marijuana products and marijuana
Okay,
products that are comprised of marijuana and other ingredients and are intended for use or consumption, such as, but not limited to, edible products, ointments, and tinctures. So I found nothing wrong with that. Seemed like a very comprehensive, succinct definition.
Okay,
So
it
I
also,
didn't mess with it.
yeah, okay. It
I think the
also-
confusion
It also talks about.
was in your document. You just started the definition and you did the dot, but yeah, we'll have the full definition. Yeah.
Because there's no need for me
Yep.
to
Yeah, you don't-
repeat it.
Yeah.
Well, it's also defined on 54 on page 1 too, or also. Right? What it isn't and what it's not. So,
That's defining products versus like the actual plant, I believe.
oh, I see, so.
Yeah.
ugh. A lot
I know.
going on here with
Back and
marijuana.
forth scrolling.
Which one's on page 4? Because isn't that just reference material for page 4 out below the dotted line? That's just
Where?
reference on page.
We're still back on number.
Oh, I thought you jumped over.
All right, so we'll
Yeah.
strike personal use, we'll strike number 3.
There you
Yes.
go.
On
Can
number
you-
4.
Can we move
Yeah.
on?
Yeah.
Okay, page 3 of my lay down.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Danny. Do you want to include ventilation? Because we have had concerns about fumes.
I think a ventilation definition is a pretty good idea, especially since the public has come forward with concerns about what is or how, this kind of spells it out, what it is and how it's supposed to be.
I think AMCO also has a requirement when you're building under the structural build of these things that it cannot be, you cannot have a scent that goes outside your facility at all in part of the regular rules, but I think having it spelled out here would be pretty good.
yeah, my only thought is that this is a very simplified form of the regulation in AMCO and could be misconstrued as there are different requirements if you have outdoor consumption.
Would you like to research our options for that?
Well,
Because it has been a concern of the public about ventilation. It would be nice to include it in our code so we know.
But it's in
yeah,
the
I
land
think,
use table.
well, I
it's just
think,
not-
yeah, it's solved in
it's
the
not
land
there.
use
It's-
table
yeah.
that
We
the
just-
commission has
It's all gone.
made
It's all gone,
outdoor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we all,
Intentionally left blank.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, I mean, I would lean more to just keeping the proposed number 7 here, that all marijuana established shall meet the
Yeah,
criteria in Alaska state statutes, because it's much more thorough in the
Okay.
state statutes, and
Right,
Right.
okay.
I
Yep.
like that.
Well,
And then-
but if the
we'll refer the public to you for any
yeah, and if the
concerns.
commission, so I guess if the commission wanted to go more strict than what Alaska state statutes require, then I would say put something here. But Alaska state statute already requires that a premise needs to be ventilated.
Okay.
So
if
let's
it's in- if
let's
it's in
strike number
consumption,
4, that's fine. Number 5, a marijuana establishment shall be set in a permanent structure with a valid certificate of zoning compliance. No marijuana establishment shall be authorized in a vehicle or trailer, a mobile food unit, a standalone intermodal shipping container, connex, or a temporary structure. So that would take care of concerns that a transient merchant or a mobile vendor would be selling marijuana products.
Yeah.
That's not in AMCO's rules or anything at this point, is there? You recall?
I
think
don't
so.
recall.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
probably good, if it's not in
yeah.
AMCO and some other things, probably good to
Yeah,
have.
that's
the
probably
state.
good to have.
Then we don't have to
Yeah.
deal with it later. Okay, so we'll keep number 5. 6, sign shall comply with state regulations and Seward City Code 15.20. Do we need to have that in there, or just,
I don't think so.
that would lump in with the next one?
I
Yeah.
think they have their
I
own
think
set
we're-
of sign requirements, don't they? Well,
We have ours, it's already, it's
Well,
there, and then the state has
do
some.
marijuana establishments have their own sign codes? Like,
oh, I thought there was
Haven't seen any.
signage.
they can't be enticing to youth
Yeah.
and all that? Do they have their own?
I don't recall seeing any when I was going through the AMCO regulations, but
Okay.
Oh, I thought they-
Because if they do, then we need to address that in our sign code. Okay, but not here. This is
Not
not a
here.
good place. Great. All right, good input. Moving on to page 8 of my handout. That would be table 1510-226, and I just said list in alphabetical order as per definitions. And then on page 4 of my handout, I just laid out the alphabetical order, but I added marijuana establishment, retail store, walk-up or drive-through exterior window pickup, because that was not in the list.
And
It
that'll
is-
be not
it is-
authorized either.
Yes.
Yeah,
Correct. So
it is on
B-
the table.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
It's,
didn't see it.
I missed it too.
Marijuana establishment retail store with drive-through window, page 9 of the packet.
Potentially left wing.
Let me see.
Page 9.
Maybe it was a matter of
Oh,
alphabetizing it differently?
are you, so on your list too, you have the retail store with drive-through window, and then in blue, retail store walk-up or
Uh-huh.
Drive,
drive-through?
walk up.
Are you wanting 2 separate ones, or are you wanting the walk-up added?
No.
I think, I got that walk-up or drive-through from state code, so
So
You just
just
want-
to
So-
replace that with the original one.
yeah, let's go up to marijuana establishment, retail store with drive-through
/walk.
let's just make the term the same.
Yeah.
Just add,
Yeah.
okay.
Let's just add
Just
walk
place it,
somehow.
yeah.
With
combining them,
with
yeah.
drive-through or walk-up, /walk-up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think,
Thanks.
Combine them together.
Yeah, combine those and then
Combine.
strike mine, because I didn't realize I already had it.
and then you'd probably wind up striking marijuana personal use as a separate
Oh
one
yeah,
altogether.
strike that one too. Good eye.
Yep.
Okay. And that's all. Any
Thanks.
input from the audience on the marijuana draft code? Oh, we should go through the table. That's really important. We're not quite done. So I didn't duplicate the table. So let's go back to the
Land use statement.
original packet on page 8. So in this one, we intentionally left blank marijuana establishment, standard cultivation facility. What did we do with, okay, marijuana establishment, limited
Limited.
cultivation facility, intentionally left blank. Marijuana establishment, product manufacturing facility, and then we change hazardous materials to
Heavy and light.
yeah, so that would be heavy. And we intentionally left that one blank. Marijuana establishment, product manufacturing, light. So let's get rid of non-hazardous and say light, just to be consistent, as we said. And that right now, we have conditional use in auto commercial, we have conditional use in central business, and we have conditional use in industrial.
Where's that?
Well,
Sorry, I got
the
it.
table is actually on page,
Oh, yeah.
it's here, then it
It's
flips,
cut.
it's
On
cut,
page
yeah.
8.
So you have to flip back and forth a little bit.
Okay, yeah, I see.
So
Oh,
light-
I see, I got it.
Light
got it.
manufacturing
Got
would
it.
be in auto commercial
Yep, Right.
and central business and industrial.
Yep.
And we were hoping there would be similar to the candy manufacturing that we allow in central business.
Right.
Yeah, that's why we put it there.
Industries that you wouldn't know they were there. So, yeah. Okay. The next one would be marijuana establishment retail store. We
Conditional.
took it out of office residential and conditional in auto commercial, harbor, and central business district. So that's where the stores could be. Moving on to marijuana establishment retail store with drive-through walk-up window, intentionally left blank.
And intentionally left blank means not allowed in any zone.
Correct.
Yes.
Just so everyone knows.
Right.
And I know. Okay.
Next one is marijuana establishment retail store with on-site consumption endorsement indoor. So if you're inside the marijuana retail store, conditional use in auto commercial, harbor, and central business district.
And conditional use, I mean, just going over these, would be a whole process where they apply for a permit, it comes before us, it's discussed, there's a lot
Yep.
of,
Correct.
and we'd evaluate, if
Right.
it fits.
Get public input,
Right.
and we could deny it
Yeah.
or permit
Permit
it
it.
with
Be a
conditions.
process that would help, further a whole understanding of how marijuana fits in town.
So the change is, it was allowed outright in those zones plus office residential, and now it's conditional. Good?
Yep.
Okay, the next one is marijuana establishment retail store with on-site consumption endorsement outdoor. And that was intentionally left blank.
Yep.
Not allowed. Okay, and the last one is marijuana establishment testing facility. It was allowed outright in all the principally commercial zones, and now it's conditional in the industrial zone.
Yep.
And I am opposed to this, and the reason I am opposed to that is the dots below that line. So I did a little more research about what exactly is a testing facility, because it's not like just a sterile laboratory where you're pouring a few chemicals and seeing if there's contaminants. They're actually allowed to process, cultivate, possess, repackage, store, transport, display, transfer to, or deliver marijuana. Which is a
interesting.
lot of what we just said we don't want. And they can receive marijuana from these various places that want it tested, and they can return the marijuana and products to various places. But what really caught my eye was how involved it is to be a testing facility, much more than I realized initially. And that is why I'm opposed. I'd like to leave that intentionally blank. Even in the industrial zone, we're finding that there's residential uses crowding in on that, and we might even want to proceed with a rezone of that triangle
Yep.
to make that residential. And our town is so little, I don't think we need to encourage businesses in the industrial zone that produce more fumes, more obnoxious byproducts and stuff. So I just recommend that we leave it intentionally blank.
Might there be benefits to a testing facility? I think that's what we were kind of
Yeah,
leaving
but-
open.
We were gonna leave it intentionally blank, I remember, but I think some of the public thought maybe it might be a good idea to leave the door open for that part of, commercial.
Did they, I wonder if the public knew how involved it was.
Yeah,
based on the
because I
definition
didn't
that you
either,
had.
so I'd be.
Because to
okay.
me, like I'm saying, it's test tubes and
Yeah.
doing whatever kind of stuff.
And maybe helpful to kind of help facilitate, doing marijuana safely, at retail stores.
Yeah, I actually opposed that, actually endorsed keeping it where it's at because I feel it does help the consumer and it does do a good thing for the industry and for the consumer. But I didn't realize either that it was that there was, I don't know what the displaying is for. I thought it was just strictly a test facility, but it does, I think that is the intent, for it to test the consumable for the public safety, and make sure that the legitimacy of the product. I mean, it could have fentanyl in it, it also needs, I think they also do maybe percentages of THC, I don't know if they do that. The repackaging, I don't quite understand. Anyway, maybe someday I'll go visit one.
Moving
I
it
don't know.
too, wouldn't it be moving it? You're moving it to place, that'd be a.
It must be highly
controlled.
Yeah, it must be highly secure, I would think.
Well, there's no doubt that it's needed, but it doesn't,
Need
and
to
it's
be here.
required, but it doesn't have to happen in our tiny town.
Yeah, I agree with Carol. There obviously isn't an issue with it getting done somewhere else, so I don't know if we need to just leave the door open for it here. There's other businesses doing it, and they're doing it well because state
Right.
mandate, and, you know, the retail businesses are doing well, so somewhere it's getting done just fine. So, and I wasn't sure, didn't know how involved it was, so I'd be okay with taking it off as well.
Yeah, if I'd get rid of the conditional use on that, just
Yeah.
leave it intentionally blank. Because if it's as involved as you say it is, can you imagine how big, it potentially could be a pretty big facility, or with coming and going, I don't know how you necessarily control that. I mean, I'm sure if it's gotta be already being done somewhere, because there's a lot of marijuana being sold somewhere and throughout the state, so, I mean, it's a what if, but the fact that the testing definition, and that's a statute, definitional by the statute, then, yeah, I would definitely let this, I'd strike the conditional use.
Any conditional use permit is like extremely involved though, and tells the whole plan of what the specific operation would be.
Yeah,
You know, I don't know, I think this is a tough one. I'm leaning on the side of being able, you know, leave the door slightly open to be able to evaluate on a case-by-case basis, you know, and if it's more of the involved, you know, something, then we'll, you know, we hear that and evaluate it, and, you know.
My experience with conditional use permits is pretty dismal. You put all these conditions on there and they do just whatever they want. Our enforcement is negligible.
and then there's a lot of the appeal process that you wind up getting into litigation.
Right.
That's just not to have it.
But the
It's not
conditional
worth it.
use permit is gonna be evaluated and voted on by this commission.
And
Right.
then, who enforces the conditions?
Well, I mean, right there, you can vote no to enforce that it doesn't occur, you know?
Chance to get appealed about litigation.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I don't have that
Chair
experience.
Griswold,
Yeah.
can you share again the things that you
Right.
found?
So this is what I found.
That's why you wanna avoid these CUP.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later.
So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
talks
okay.
about you
I have
have
no
to be
experience.
21 years or older to be involved in this business. They're allowed to possessing, cultivating, processing, repackaging, storing, transporting, displaying, transferring, or delivering marijuana. So cultivation
Where
kind of
did
caught
you-
my eye.
Find that?
Because
Because I'm on the state statutes, and it
So
says
this is from,
a licensed marijuana facility may not sell, deliver, distribute, or transfer marijuana or a marijuana product to a consumer with or without compensation.
which one are you talking to?
This is the Alaska statutes of a marijuana testing facility.
Maybe is there a difference between the consumer and then,
Oh, yeah,
Are
I'm
they
not
just
saying they're gonna sell to
transporting-
consumers,
Okay.
definitely not allowed.
they're just selling
But they
to
can cultivate, so I'm picturing, okay, they could have a greenhouse, and they could have the
I
herbicides
see.
and the pesticides and the,
But they're only transporting and
Right,
selling to
between-
retail stores or,
or the manufacturing facilities, whatever. Yeah, not the consumers.
I don't understand.
That wasn't an issue.
They're cultivating? I don't understand. We already have a different entity for
I know, so
cultivation.
there
So
it is.
why are they
They-
cultivating?
Well, maybe they need to test the seeds and see if, I don't know what they do. But anyway, I felt that a testing facility was involved a lot more than I originally thought.
And that's from the AMCO.
It popped up at the top of my list here. lawjustia.com, codes, Alaska Title 17, Chapter 8, Section 17.38.070.
That's statute, not administrative code, right?
That's, yes.
I mean, there's a certain, I think, being open to a testing facility, I'm thinking of a testing facility, you know, like Commissioner Hubbard was describing, testing the safety of product, and it's a safety thing. So being open to it can show a responsibility, you know, you know, we have marijuana retail, we have here, so that's where being
I
open to a
think-
testing facility, I don't know.
I think that if we're on the fence on it, we have to figure out more information about it.
Yeah, because I
think that's
skimmed
where we're
through
at.
that whole article of the testing facility, and it makes no mention of any of that. So, yeah, I'm kind of.
Let's revisit.
Did you
this.
click on my link?
Before I say
I'm-
yes,
I'm
I
looking
say
at the-
no.
It's a hot link.
Right, it's just a laboratory.
I've been skimming through
It's
the
good to have a
info.
testing, well, we're open
Go
to
ahead and
testing
click on the
facility,
hot
you know.
link.
He's on the MCO, so it might be different.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be, but yeah.
Maybe we revisit that one.
At
I
least
know we're trying to get
information.
prepared here, but yeah.
I'm okay just
Are we
keeping
feeling
it
good on all
I'm
the
not-
other adjustments to land table? You know, there's some big
Yes,
ones.
yeah. Anything from the public?
Yeah.
Getting towards the end of the
Yeah.
marijuana.
Yeah, so at the last work session, when it was the discussion on marijuana establishments, retail stores in the different business districts, I had asked if the other 21 and over business alcohol had any restrictions put on it. And Greenhurst, the city planner, looked it up and found that currently in code, it is permitted outright. And so there was a comment, I forget which commissioner, about, you know, it's interesting comparing marijuana and alcohol to each other because alcohol has been legal for 100 years, where marijuana is marijuana retail in Alaska has been about 10 years. We know about alcohol. And I would just like to point out that at the September 23rd City Council meeting, in the city manager's report for the police department, that the police chief stated that they are seeing an uptick in DUIs. I, working with Recover Alaska, was able to give me a snapshot of current licenses for alcohol sales, which includes like restaurants, retail, and brewing, and there are 30 within Seward city limits. For marijuana, there are currently 2, and we are already putting conditional use permits. I would argue that we do know what alcohol can do to individuals, families, and community as a whole. There's been the discussion of outdoor consumption due to smell. There's no visual of the consumption taking place, but there is a smell, whereas alcohol is consumed not openly, but in public with a waist-high fence, so it is viewable by the public, including small children. At a festival every May that includes enticement of community members of all ages. So I want to make sure that we are not necessarily comparing, but that we are not targeting one 21 and over business entity from another.
I see what you're saying. The only thing that I would say is that, you know, a lot of these things, there are a lot of bars and a lot of things here, but you also know that a lot of the laws have changed for the last 100 some odd years, that things have been here. And so all of our alcohol establishments a good portion of them are territorial liquor licenses. And so there was no cap on it. If Seward were to, you know, if somebody wanted to come in and open a bar or something now here, they wouldn't be allowed to because they're capped out. You have to buy somebody else's liquor license that is in town. There's no more that will be issued. So that's the kind of thing that would happen here. So that's the thing, is that's why, I think if I recall correctly, if if everything was current, knowing the other bars, I think you'd have to have one bar for every 2,500 people in your town, the way the regulations, from my understanding, read. So that's how it is matured and tightened up so much. But because you have grandfathered, then you've got all of them here. So it's sort of like apples and oranges a little bit in the comparison.
You have to go 7 miles past the pit.
Yeah, yeah, probably so.
7 miles?
7 miles past the pit to reapply for a full liquor license.
Yep.
So the new restaurants and hotels and stuff that are on this list that have opened up within the last 5 years must have purchased somebody else's
No, I said a bar.
license.
I said a bar. There's
bar.
there's hotel licensing. If you have over
Okay.
16 rooms, you can have a hotel liquor license.
Okay.
That comes naturally. That comes with it. There are specific guidelines depending upon the type of establishment you are. If you're a restaurant and a bar, that's one thing. If you're a bar, then maybe serve food, that's a different thing. So that's how they break it out.
I just wanted to comment. I appreciate what you're saying, because there is this open air drinking and when we have festivals, and I think you're right. We need to decide what kind of message we want to send, an example we want to set for our youth. And I saw that during the 4th of July, actually, and I think it got a little abused. There were some areas that it wasn't corralled right, and I think we need to tighten up on that. And maybe that's another, if we want to bring that up at another time, because it is a separate subject, but it's still the same, and it does stress a lot of our public safety as well. So,
Yeah. And it might be good to invite someone from public safety to the joint work session. I mean, because I know the last work session, there was questions brought up about, how it's known that somebody is under the influence of marijuana at the time. And so it would be nice. I think education is key, right, for the commissioners and the public as a whole. And so having someone here to address that from public safety and spread that education would be very helpful.
And just to clarify, is that more of a Title 8 kind of regulation than a Title 15?
The,
Regulating alcohol beer gardens?
yeah, on that alcohol beer gardens.
I can't think of
Yeah.
anything in our
Yeah.
Title 15 that
Not in
would,
15, it would be the other one.
but I think it's under 8, and that's not us. But nonetheless, it would be nice to have the chief here.
maybe we could bring that up in our joint work session too. to see.
Right.
So.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm just curious, it's hypothetical. So you take away one of the licenses and you say that there is a full bar, beer, wine, liquor, license available. Do their restrictions mirror this? Or are we going way past what their requirement would be? Because I see them as very similar in their uses for recreation. So I would, as much as I would like to see it regulated, I would want to make sure that it is a just regulation, fairness between both industries.
Would administration like to address that?
I'm gonna point out the regulations in the land use allowed table for alcohol-related businesses for your
Would the commission
comparison.
like to take time to do that?
I'm not looking for
Or-
an answer.
Yeah, right.
It's a hypothetical.
Yeah, I'd
I'm
kind of
just
like to
stating
move
that-
on, but
Yeah.
note that concern.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that you don't want to get too far off that path.
Maybe we can draw some parallels and maybe a further thing, say alcohol allows this and marijuana allows this, and make it comparable in that respect. Like, we don't have alcohol testing facilities, So, that's what started us here to have a marijuana testing facility. We have no alcohol testing facilities
Right.
one way or another.
Right.
But it would be nice to have, as far as the applicability of businesses, the opportunity for people to have something going on. It should be the same if alcohol is, or if marijuana is as legal as alcohol it is in the state of Alaska, other than the federal rules, because it is still federally illegal, then they should probably have the same shot at it for the most part. But I would also concur too with the outdoor stuff, because I've had to worry about people having a beer garden or something like this, and it's nice, it's only a certain amount of fence that you have. I think it's 3 foot or whatever it is. You could have a higher fence of some sort to obscure the view. You can maybe make that more specific to Seward. You can have something, a higher fence above and beyond what the state requires, if that is, potentially a challenge.
So what is the difference of, do we have limits on pack stores? Like who can sell alcohol?
The distributions, I believe
Yes,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, package stores, basically.
Yeah, and so that's mostly what we're addressing here. And what spurred the conversation was when there was the new endorsement of on-site consumption. And the state just approved that last year. And so that's what brought the conversation forward here. And the city of Seward had no regs or a land use table that recognized that.
I understand what's going on.
So it is kind of a different animal, like Councilmember Sullivan said, what we're dealing with, just because it functions differently. So, yeah, in a way, as far as emitting smell and that kind of thing. So I don't know.
One thing that does add a little bit of I guess it throws a little monkey wrench into it. There is no limit to how many marijuana retail things. There's no limit like there's alcohol.
Yeah.
You can have a marijuana store wherever one's allowed to be. It's not regulated by how many people in your town and all the rest of that, so you have that argument too. So, but making them comparable and seeing what they can do, and then we could decide as a commission how many, I guess what you can have, or our recommendation would go to the, the council, if it's done by CUP as opposed to outright.
And with on-site consumption, an interesting point is that many Alaska communities are voting to not allow it outright. Anchorage voted it's not allowed. Soldotna, there was a list we talked about, so.
And I'm not opposed to what is being discussed here. I'm just, since we're having the discussion about a 21 and over industry, that maybe once this one's tackled, that we now are identifying the gaps, and that we talked about down the line, and making them, comparable, and because, yes, it's been legal for a long time, but we do know the outcomes of it, and it's not necessarily favorable.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I like saying 21, they're both 21 and over things, that's the same. I think you're going to try to equate them, or, that can go on and on as far as, yeah.
And to your point,
sorry,
we can invite Chief Nickel to that work session too. I can also, if you're interested, I did ask a while back, and I'm sorry I haven't shared this yet, what the process is for a drug DUI, if the commission is interested in hearing that. I'll just read from his email. For a drug DUI, the process is nearly identical to an alcohol DUI. We interview the driver the best we can to determine what, if any, intoxicant they are under the influence of. Then we administer the standard field sobriety tests. He lists a few different tests that they do. Regardless of alcohol or other intoxicants, people will regularly fail these tests in part or in whole if they are under the influence. From this point, if they failed the field test, we bring them back in person to the station to administer a data master instrument test, and this is a test specific to alcohol. If alcohol is present, the process will stop at this point, and the person can be processed and arrested. If the result of the data master test is 0, the officer will apply for a warrant from a judge, and if granted, take the driver for a blood test. And that's where the process separates. Once blood is obtained via the warrant, the person is released and their license will be returned to them. And that's because they don't have immediate evidence to show they were under the influence. Similar to an alcohol DUI, the The blood will be processed at the crime lab. Once the results are back, if the presence of THC or other intoxicants is detected, the person will be summoned to court or a warrant for their arrest will be issued, and they'll face a DUI charge. So they can, he made the point that we can and do detect drug DUIs. It's just a slower process than for alcohol DUIs.
Lots to know.
Yep.
Any other comments from the commission? No? Would the commission like to take a 5-minute break? Stand up? We want to just keep going? Okay.
Keep charging on.
Keep going.
Yep.
Well,
So to summarize,
Oh, yes.
we'll make those adjustments that have been discussed, and that will be what is brought to city council on our joint work session.
Yes.
I
That'd be a
think
good
we
idea.
got it pretty much.
I think so.
Everybody feels good on the table.
Yeah.
And that last testing facility, we'll kind of touch on a little more maybe.
Well, we can bring that up to council, see what they want to do too.
Yeah, that could be a good discussion with them.
Yeah.
If there's just kind of one thing that we're still up in the air on,
Yeah.
but we're solid on everything else at the table. So I think that discussion will really be on the table.
Oh, yeah.
I'm anticipating that, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'll be a good thing to go.
Sounds good.
Very straightforward.
Alrighty. Let's move on to accessory dwelling units. Would you like to do a little introduction to that?
Yeah, so the proposed changes in this one are very simple so far because our discussion hasn't gotten too in-depth yet. It's just making some changes to the definitions, so adjusting under the first definition, accessory building, where it references accessory or mother-in-law apartment, changing efficiency apartment to accessory dwelling unit, and then making that same change down under the definition of dwelling, then letter C. So we're scratching efficiency apartment, just calling it an accessory dwelling unit, and then it still has to be associated with a single-family dwelling. So you couldn't have an accessory dwelling unit in a duplex or a fourplex or any of those other multifamily homes, only a single-family dwelling. But it could be located within or on the same property, and then the size would be no more than 40% of the gross floor area of the primary single-family dwelling. And then we scratched that it consists of not more than one habitable room, so we scratched that so that it could have bedrooms if the space allowed for it. The size is constrained to that less than 40%, or yeah, no more than 40% of the primary. Those are the only changes at this point.
The only thing I have a question, I'm sorry, if Commissioner.
Go ahead.
When you have sanitary facilities, is there a specific definition to that? Because that could be like a honey bucket, you know?
I had that same question. Where's that definition for that?
Yeah, I was sort of wondering, is it always, bathroom, a toilet, a shower, or a sink? Is that always,
Yeah, is that a building code?
it is?
It has to have
Plumbing.
a toilet, shower, and one sink.
Okay, that answers my question.
Are those plumbed, or, because there's composting toilets
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
Good.
That was one of my questions too. I had another question on, let's see, number 1 under B, section E.
What page are we?
That would be page 12 in our
Okay.
computer one. It says, let's see, it's located on the same lot or adjacent lot under the same ownership. Now, wouldn't adjacent lot be a new build? I thought, I was under the impression that these are on their own and a lot with another house. If it's on its own separate lot, then it's an entirely new build, correct?
I would say if you have like 2 lots next
Yeah,
to each other
like-
and you want to build on both,
Yeah.
both would be primary
Yeah,
dwelling units
it would
versus.
be a new build on a separate lot.
You could have an ADU on each of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so under this, all of this is made, I'm going through this, looking at, all this is made to, so somebody can build a smaller home on their existing lot for alternative income or an elderly family member or just another family member. But then this seemed a little, this is just a new build.
Yeah,
I
I think
don't know.
adjacent just needs to be knocked off,
Yeah,
right?
just.
Is that a misprint, you think?
Because if
And
it's a
it-
different lot, you
yeah,
can go through
it
a
just
different
needs to go.
process, in the home.
It's a whole new build, right?
I think what came to my mind is that if you are a commercial building,
Mhm.
you cannot span several properties. You have to replat it to one parcel.
Yeah,
But residential, and you can see it all through town if you look at parcels, most of our town is divided up into 30 by 100 foot lots. Most of our, south of Van Buren, original town site of Seward lots. And residential homes span those without having to replat. So I think the reason they said it that way was because you're not required to replat. So if your house has a side yard, it's part of your parcel, but it's actually divided up into 3 30 by 100 foot lots. So you could put it on your side yard and still be part of your parcel, your tax parcel, but not have to.
I think we should change that because they should, if they want to put one, they should join the lots, because then we get into a messy area later when somebody goes to sell a lot.
Oh, yeah, it's a
And you end
mess.
up with stuff like my backyard.
I know.
So,
I
Yeah,
don't
it's a
think-
mess.
I don't think they should be under accessory buildings at all.
yeah.
I think accessory dwelling unit should be its own category. I think restricting it to an accessory building creates too many issues and is overly restrictive at the same time. I would just put it as a separate definition.
And that was what I gleaned from this packet, is it's no longer considered an accessory building. It's a separate definition called an accessory dwelling unit, which is not an accessory building. So and I spent a lot of time going through the accessory building definition because I think it's really poorly written. But anyway, that's not our point tonight. We're discussing the accessory dwelling unit. And it's no longer an accessory building. It used to be, I think, when it was an efficiency apartment, but it's no longer that. So
That's a whole
we're
separate
done
thing.
with all the bad
Yeah,
stuff
I
that's
get
in
that.
accessory building.
I get that confusion, and I don't think, even though it's worded this way, it would restrict owner of 2 lots from building 2 primary dwelling. But yeah, I see.
I can see a lot of people coming in here after we've made the change, everybody having to replat their home, their land south of Van Buren, all of us having to come in and having to redo that. That would be a mess.
It would be a mess.
That would be busy.
Right. Some of the regulations I ran across said you could not sell your ADU separate from the primary dwelling. But because, and we do it all the time here, we split up our lots and sell off the side lot. If it happens to have a dwelling on it, I don't see how we could prevent that. I don't see how we could. But,
Then it becomes the primary of that new lot.
and then it would be the primary that we lot, right?
So the main thing that this language is changing, because realize that people can build these essentially accessory dwelling units in their home right now, except it would have to be part of the main structure and not more than one habitable room. So this definition is now expanding that to allow people to build a little accessory dwelling unit that's not attached, and they could have bedrooms. That's basically what it's allowing. And so for the commission to decide, like, is that okay? Do we want it more regulated than that? Do we want them to stay attached?
So this is actually a detached accessory dwelling unit.
Well, it could be, I mean, it says,
So it's
yeah,
a
located within or on the same property. So yeah, we're not gonna necessarily define attached or detached. But yeah, it includes either one of those, attached or detached.
Was there a requirement at one time that they had to be attached?
Yes,
Right now.
still is.
Right now.
Really?
So that's the main
That's what we're
change.
getting at is taking it out.
That's very
I
odd.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think?
There.
Yeah.
Yeah, so It makes sense in some areas, but not in a high seismic area. You have, because of our seismic density, you have a building and your ADU, which have completely different sizes, weights, densities. And now you're connecting this building and you're making them move the same. And that actually adds to problems on both the buildings. When we were trying to make something small of a run for 2-bedroom unit on a slab, move the same way that a 2-story house with a 42-inch, it doesn't work. Simple hydraulics is going to actually create more damage between both structures. And so I actually don't feel that it's a good idea from that aspect.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great
Wow.
point. Earthquake is just much better, safer, less damage if they are not attached.
Let them move
Independently.
independently.
Yeah.
Or be internal. If you converted your basement to an ADU, that would be very safe seismically.
Yes.
Same thing moving.
Yeah, definitely need to get rid of the breezeway.
Mm-hmm.
No connection.
And then the many room, the other change is like now going from one room to many rooms on a accessory dwelling unit, and that's, you have any thoughts on that, or?
Well, I think the limiting of its size is good.
Right.
You know, because you still have our base codes for coverage of the entire lot. So that is also going to work with your sizing of the ADU as in terms of your entire lot coverage. So they may not have the lot coverage you need to be able to create this.
Right.
You know, so they still have to deal with that aspect. But as far as the ADU, you can limit the size by percentage, by footprint. You can actually get it a different roof height. Lots of places across the country are allowing them, but bringing their local thoughts and ideas to each one. So it's not, it doesn't have to be just a blanket, yes, build this. Yes, build this, but, you know, this is what we'd like to see. So,
Do you like 40% of, like, it can only be 40% of the size of the, and there's that other check on total lot coverage as well, which they have to make work, but,
so there was, the numbers I was reading, they were all over the place.
Yeah.
From 10% to 50%. So they were really, I mean, I went through every county in Washington State, and they were all over the place. So there wasn't really any kind of connectivity, and everybody just settled on 25% or, you know. So I think they're, you know, I think they're beneficial to all age groups and financial backgrounds. I think my biggest point was to get breezeways out of them.
yeah.
That's just, as nice as they are, you know, breezeways are great during new construction when you're actually countersinking your beams and everything into both structures. Both structures have the same depth of footing or slab, and they're likely to move better together. Right now, typically, if we're adding a breezeway, we're adding it just to the outside, and it's just to satisfy the code. It's not a, you know, most of the people I've talked to that have added them have been happy. They were mad that they had to add them to make it happen, but down the road, they were happier. Mostly because they're out of the weather when they're moving their linens and things like that to whatever, maybe a rental or something like that. But yeah, at the end of the day, I like them. I like the look of them, but I don't know if it should be a requirement.
Yeah. People can still do breezeways if they want. Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you. That's great
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
The code doesn't require them, in any form. It's just if they're going to put them in, then I regulate it to building and fire, all the codes that needs to be there.
Last time we discussed on this, there was a discussion on percent size coverage.
Right.
Or, excuse me, not percent size coverage, percent of gross floor area or square footage.
What is the difference?
Well, I think that it makes more sense, like the building inspector was saying, to go with the percent because we're already kind of covered with the lot coverage.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if it's, I don't know how you guys think about 40, but 40 seems fine as long as, and I'd also like to add in that the roof can't be taller than the primary structure. So it's smaller.
I'm not sure I agree with either of those, honestly, because I think it's like arbitrary depending on basically what you build first on a property. Like if you buy a property and it has a very small house and you get a family, you want to put a bigger house for your family on there and rent out the small house maybe. Like, why not? Why can't you do that? I mean, you have this restriction that suddenly you have to build an even smaller house on your lot. If it fits with whatever the minimum lot coverage or maximum lot coverage is, why restrict it, is my point.
Would
I
you,
hear that,
would you switch, so your new big house would be the primary and the small
I mean,
house
if
would
they
be
meet all the
accessory?
regulations, exactly, like, it could have been built that way in the first place, so why,
But would that take care of
restrict it.
that problem?
well, yeah, if you're able to switch them in the definition, I don't know if we could make that work, but, yeah. I don't think there should be precedent based on what's existing on the property that restricts you from building something else that could have been legal if you were able to do that in the first place.
I don't think this necessarily limits what you're saying one can do. I mean, they're just, if they
Well,
want,
right.
if they want to add on to their home and rearrange it and then have the ADUs, just saying. if
It
you're
does,
gonna-
because an add-on is exactly what we were just talking about. You need to make sure you're matching the existing
But they're
foundation.
adding for different purposes, like what you were saying. That's a different
I think,
reason.
yeah, you might be talking about an addition.
Yeah, they're
You
just
want a
adding
bigger
addition to the
house,
home.
you put on an addition,
Yeah, but.
so that, there's
And
no
the dwelling
restrictions
unit will be
there.
There may be, but we're also restricting people to force them to do an addition versus doing a new construction, like, and they might not want to do that. I'm just saying, why restrict people arbitrarily when they could have done something one way, but now because of what's already on the property, we're forcing them to do it a certain way.
You would get no percentage, no 40%, and you're just covered by the lot coverage for all buildings.
Yeah,
That's an interesting option.
I think that, go ahead.
I think based on current code, an accessory dwelling unit would still be restricted in height at 20 feet.
I think that there's two,
But didn't we just decide it wasn't an accessory building? It's its own thing?
it's something we could decide too.
Yeah.
Certainly something we could
I mean, I
decide.
think any structure that is not the primary building on a lot does fall under the requirements in code for an accessory building.
I think we're looking at slightly two different things. So I don't know if they necessarily need to be, that could be something down the road, but I understand where you're coming from. If there's like a larger lot that is a small house and they want to build a primary house, but I feel that this is different than that. Like, we're not looking at how you should build a primary house on an existing lot. We're looking specifically at building a smaller home for a specific use on an existing lot. I think they're two different things. Like, I think they're two different things, because this is, I already have a primary home and I want to build a smaller home for my mother-in-law or as a rental on my existing lot. Versus coming and saying, I would like to build a new primary home on my lot. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me it seems like they're different.
I think it's, so how I'm interpreting Commissioner Horn's stuff is, so you get a lot, an empty lot, and you spend all your money on this lot, and so you can't really afford to build a large home, so you build a small home. Down the road, code would restrict you from building something bigger, even if you have the space. If we have, restriction based on the percentage or square footage. Is that kind of what you're?
That's what it sounds like to me. Now, would this process be for an ADU, for a conditional use permit? Would that be under a CUP thing, or would that be outright? Reason why I was saying is to say, for example, to take your scenario, is that you got a big lot, tiny house, and then you want to build a new one. If you know, a new piece of property on there, you're going to the commission and say, look, this is my smaller house, I want to put a bigger house, I want to change this to be the primary, or the additional unit once I get my new one, and then work with the commission on that. So maybe that's where you could switch the definition of the house, so you're not locked in.
Can't you accommodate that?
I don't know.
In your office? I mean, you could, like you said, the purpose is, and based on that purpose, and the building permit, can't you flesh that out? I mean, you're not gonna stop them from building a bigger place, are you? Because they're not gonna call, I mean, if they don't call it an ADU, it's not an ADU, it's just building a structure.
But if it's an accessory structure, it would be restricted in code to 20 feet.
So if you're building a primary and you reverse the math on this, you have a 400 square foot tiny home, would they have to build a minimum of 1,000 square feet house?
Right.
If you go in reverse of what we're pushing.
Is that
Yeah.
is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Do you see it that way?
That small house would have to be no greater than 40%. So that might just be a whole different conversation.
Well, I think that's why the 40%, I think that shows why just a 40% thing is crazy by itself. Like, that example right there, I think that shows why it's crazy, because it should be whatever you want that meets the restrictions of the maximum lot coverage. Like,
Two buildings the exact same size.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if that's what you need, like, that's what you need, and that's what,
And
if
you're
that's what
under
fits.
What is the lot coverage? You know, we were talking about that for, what's that number for like the?
30%.
35.
Yeah, so if that's what you're governed by, you gotta be just under 35% between your two buildings. Do any design you want.
I'm alarmed that we're considering allowing two structures, two dwellings on a single-family parcel. In my residential one neighborhood, I expect the density to be whatever it says in the code, 7 houses per acre, or whatever it says, I can't remember. I don't expect to live in a neighborhood that has two dwellings on a single residential, single-family home. And I don't see why we should allow it to be as big as that. I don't think why we would want that in the first place. My impression of ADUs was like around, when I did some research, it seemed like 1,000 square feet was a pretty popular size. And I was looking at Washington and Pennsylvania and whatever, California. 1,000 square feet attached to the building. They didn't talk about seismic stuff. And frankly, we don't worry about earthquakes here. We put fire station in a tsunami run-up zone. We don't care. We say that's going to be later. We'll clean it up and ask for federal help when that happens. So I'm not swayed by that opinion that we need to separate a slab foundation from a 42-inch foundation for seismic purposes. I would like, if we're going to go with this ADU thing, I would like to be as inintrusive as possible. Inside, if possible, convert your basement, convert your spare room, whatever, to an ADU that has its own cooking facilities, would have living, sleeping, food preparation, and sanitation facilities, and a lockable entrance door, a maximum gross floor area of 1,000 square feet, subordinate in size to the primary dwelling unit, and internal or attached to the primary dwelling. That would be as inobtrusive as possible, would retain what I hope is still a charming town. We're kind of going down the road, we're not losing a lot of our charm, but there are more efficient ways to provide housing. And I'm an advocate for building apartment buildings that are suitable for 1, 2, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, and not subverting our very valuable residential areas to become more commercialized and higher density. I don't, and then if you build 1,000 square foot detached structure, you're talking about $300,000 right there. It's $300 a square foot to build something in our town. I don't think it's very realistic, and I hate to lose what we have. We have a beautiful town, and we're losing it because we're allowing people to cram in here and get rid of side yards and landscaping and historic trees and shrubs, greenery, you know. I don't think we need to go this route by having detached buildings that are as big as you want. I just don't get
Well,
it.
with the 35%, you know,
Well,
Right.
it doesn't lose, you know, it just allows some options, like how many of these get built. I mean, you know, time will tell, but it's not like
I'm really opposed to having more than one dwelling unit on a residential property. However, if you live in a duplex zone,
That's changing zones is what you're getting
then
at.
maybe you could have a dwelling unit, but they should be duplexes. If you have a single-family home in an R2 zone, you can build the other half of your duplex. Then you have a duplex in a duplex zone. If you have a single-family home in an R3 zone, you could build a duplex, just one ADU per property. But nothing in the R1 zone. We are zoned R1, one residential home per that lot. And that respects the reason why people bought an R1 zone. So I think this would only apply for me if it was in R2, and if you have a single-family dwelling, finish your duplex. Attach, because that's what's there, not two separate dwellings. Getting into a lot of worms when
If
we
you-
do that.
So we can't, if we want to go somewhere like that route, that you could allow an accessory dwelling unit in an R2 or R3 zoning district where a single-family home is built. You couldn't convert a single-family, or it wouldn't be turning a single-family home into it wouldn't be called a duplex now by adding an accessory dwelling unit, because a duplex has a whole different code, building code, that it has to follow to be considered a duplex. But we could consider potentially changing the land uses allowed table that only allows accessory dwelling units as defined here in R2, R3 zoning districts, and delete it from the R1, RR zoning districts. And then that would, sounds like it would achieve what you're saying.
But if you had a duplex in an R2 zone and you added an ADU, you would then have a triplex.
Well, you can't add, by definition, an ADU can only be part of a single-family dwelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I understand, and that makes sense. You don't want to potentially keep bumping zonings up,
Correct.
you know.
Correct.
What if we, like Courtney said, I like that. What if we change it, restrict it kind of based by zoning, but then maybe do what Commissioner Horn said and get rid of the 40%, but it's based by zoning. So in a larger lot, in a larger zoned, in a higher zoned area, a larger building could be built because it's already zoned for something like that and still has to adhere to the 35% lot coverage. And also can't be an additional duplex because it fits, still has to maintain with code to be a single family, an accessory unit with a single family. Like not a duplex with another duplex, like Courtney was just saying.
So in an R2 zone, what's the lot coverage?
I think it's, let me pull that up.
Yeah, it does
It gets
bump up,
more-
doesn't it?
Yeah, it gets, you can cover more and more.
The R2 zone is still 35%, R3 is 40%, and UR is 40%.
So if a single-family home in an urban residential, you're thinking of allowing that? And then they could also do it as a short-term lodging because you're not constrained.
In urban residential, they would still have to, if they were doing a short-term rental, they would still have to live in their primary dwelling as their.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we have good restrictions added on
I think we
that.
tightened that up in the
Right.
short-term
Yeah, so
rental
that
thing, okay,
helps.
last go around.
Okay.
Just thinking of downtown too, like wouldn't most lots be, there's no room to build, right? They're already at the close enough to 35%, you notice kind of,
Most of them, but it's
like
still,
with those small lots you described earlier, you know?
most of them, it's still prudent to
Sure.
set the lines.
Mhm.
What if we do something like R1, an accessory dwelling unit can go inside a house, and then when we bump up to R2, 3, and UR, it changes to outside and lets it become larger, because they're already zoned for a larger structure anyway. They could have had a duplex, but they decided to build a small house. So what's wrong with that zoning having another medium to large house on it?
I mean, that sounds good to me on the surface. I have to think about it more, but
Yeah, of course. I'm not gonna figure this out right now, but I mean, that lets a neighborhood that, like an R1 neighborhood that's supposed to look like a single-family neighborhood, stay that way while allowing people to utilize extra space within their home to make money. But then also lets the R2s who could have had larger homes but don't, let them have more home to potentially create a rental there, but it doesn't mess the neighborhood up because they were slated to be larger anyway.
But you still have two separate dwellings
Mhm.
on one parcel.
True, but you could have, anyway, it would have been two, they just would have been attached.
I don't
On an
know.
R1
We don't
or
allow
R2?
that yet
On an R1 or an R2?
in any R1, R2, or
Well, it wouldn't
R2,
be
R3, and URs.
Wouldn't be R1.
Not
what we're
R1.
talking about right now. Yeah.
But
It's R2.
right now, we have one dwelling per residential lot.
Yes, but a duplex is essentially two. It's just joined. So how, I mean, I'm just speaking out, I haven't
Right.
figured it out myself, but
Right.
is it, I don't want to say worse, is it different? How much more different is it to have a duplex versus two homes? I mean, I don't know, I have to think about it, but
Slippery slope.
You're raising the burden for somebody who wants to have a duplex, but again, purchased maybe a single family on R2, right? Now they have to conform to the existing building versus, either they demolish it and build a duplex, or they conform to the existing building, or this would give them the option to do the cheapest of the three, plop another one, where they could just demolish it, and if they were rich, they could demolish it and build the giantest thing they wanted, but, I'm just trying to be fair to people who can't afford to do that, like.
But still, I think the intent is 1,000 square feet, something small. And the 40% of the gross floor area of the main house just means that large houses have large lots and they can overwhelm the neighborhood because they have a large house and are allowed to build 40% of their gross floor area, they can build a huge ADU and everyone else has to build, proportionate to what they have. So I just think, my impression was, it's a small thing. It's not a huge family home, just because you have already a huge family home. You can't build another one. 40% is still pretty big. So I would prefer to go down to 1,000 square feet maximum floor area. It's big enough for the food preparation, sanitary facilities. And I noticed it says sleeping areas, you don't even call them bedrooms anymore. That gets away from some code things. Go ahead, Jeremy.
So just for clarification, the houses that are being built new up in the new subdivision, all of those are on either side of 1,000 square feet. So those are large houses. I'm not actually thinking of an ADU as being 1,000 square feet. The two in the middle are 988 square feet. The two on the outside, and those are 2-bedroom. The ones on the outsides are 3-bedroom at 1,150. So those are homes. That's not an ADU, that's a home. So an ADU should not be considered as 1,000 square feet. That needs to be much smaller.
Give us a number.
The code states that a tiny home is 400 square feet. So I would say, you're looking at a room, so say a kitchen, dining room, living room, and a bedroom. So you're looking at maybe one large open space with a bedroom, shower, tub. I mean, just, shoot from the hip, between 400 and 600 square feet, I would think is, you still needs to fall under accessory, not a full-on home. So, yeah, I mean, and these 1,000 square foot homes are costing people $400,000. So that price tag is also not accessory.
So in our code, we have studio apartments, which are units in an apartment building, not a separate dwelling unit. And those are 500 feet or less, 500 square feet or less.
And that studio, has no rooms in it. So a studio is just a square. So there's no room.
I think the bathroom is separate.
Bathroom.
Right. So is that what we're envisioning, a studio-sized dwelling unit, 500 square feet or less?
I still think we're talking about two different things when it comes to Commissioner Horseth. And I agree that accessory dwelling units should be smaller, but I think Commissioner Horseth does have a good take on that small house with a larger, that maybe we could come back to something on that later. This should be small, but that does make sense if you had a big lot in a zoning that could require larger homes and you were stuck with a small house. Something might be able to work out very different. So I'd like to look at that later, but I do think that it should be smaller. I was going to say 600. My cabin's 600, and it's a one bedroom, cooking, full kitchen. It's appropriate living size.
Let's just build more apartments, more studio apartments, more 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom apartments that people can actually live in. I don't know what a tiny home,
Yeah, we want to do that
Just-
too, that's a separate thing.
just,
Yeah, unfortunately, apartment buildings are expensive to build, and there's nobody coming in to do that at this point, but, yeah.
but
This allows
That's
for,
a win.
organic development by owners, and we don't have to be rich property developers. It's just, one of us can build like an accessory and do that, and we don't have to have millions of dollars to buy up a bunch of lots and do that. And it does give us options. It's not just all the housing crisis alone, but it gives people options, and it seems like, we've already had people come to us with this kind of idea, and it's overly restrictive, I think, with what we have now. And not to say what we have to go with this, but Anchorage, I want to note, says the max size is the larger of either 900 square feet or 40% of the primary dwelling is the way they define it. So up to 1,200 square feet, they do cap it there. So they have
could you say that again?
yes.
900 square feet or?
It is 900 to 1,200 square feet, or, sorry, let me just read it to you, because it phrases it better. Max size is the larger of either 900 square feet or 40% of the primary dwelling up to 1,200 square feet.
I like that better than just a blanket 40% of the gross square footage of the primary building.
It gives some flexibility
Keeps it a
too.
little bit small.
I don't like to box in our builders or people's ideas on what they want to build. I would like to think they would use common sense. I do get concerned about taking an R1 though and then turning it into a bunch of rooms to house people. But hopefully our regulations will control that. Because we have a lot of homes that are being used as bunkhouses
Legally.
in R1 areas.
Legally, they're considered a family. That's how they get around it. Go ahead.
Yes, so there's a couple of things that are going on that I just kind of want to comment. First, I understand the optics for R1 and what it's zoned at now. I am a little confused by being okay with putting accessory dwelling within the residential home for R1 because if it's going to be used as a nightly rental, I mean, you're increasing traffic within that residential area. And, you know, two cooking units within one home, that's not considered an apartment building or duplex or whatnot. I'm not sure what the building codes would allow for that. So I just have some concerns with being okay with an accessory dwelling unit in R1, just not being detached. I think there could be problems with having it enclosed within the residential structure. And with the 40%, I think that just driving around, I'm horrible at estimating, but just driving around, it seems that many of the homes are pretty modest within the city sewer limits. So I think that, you know, with 400 square feet being the definition of a tiny home, up to, you know, 600 square feet, I think that would cover most of what is available for people to build, and then with the lot coverage percentage. So I'm not sure how into the weeds or specific you guys want to get. But yeah, understanding, I do live outside of city limits, but I do have a mother-in-law cabin on my property in which my mother lives in, and I grew up in a multi-generational home, and it's been a very positive experience for my family to have some semblance of that here for me in the community and for my kids and my family. So, you know, there are positives to exploring this further, not just for the possibility of additional income, but also, you know, being there for growing families or elderly family members or whatnot.
Thank you.
Great points, yeah. And, you know, so a family member living in this unit, I think that's a plus for many reasons that Christina outlined nicely. And also the chance for, you know, long-term rental to provide housing. I think people would do that too, so.
Can I ask staff a question? What are some of the biggest frustrations that you have for those people walking in the door trying to do something like this? Or expand their place or whatever?
I think the situations that we see the most are not so much people doing new builds, but conversions. So they have an apartment, they have a basement, they have, a garage, and they're converting it into, or want to convert it into an efficiency apartment. So the struggles are, they have to now connect that detached garage, which is,
Okay, so the breezeway issue, which
the
we
breezeway.
were kind of thinking we were just
Right.
gonna do away with, so that's.
and then
one.
the limit to one habitable room is pretty constricting. Because there was an applicant that wanted to build a single family home, but then have an apartment for his mother, but didn't want to be constrained to that one habitable room. So that was a challenge for him. He wanted to have a separate room for his mother to stay in and make it a nice, comfortable apartment. But the definition in our code made it difficult to build that.
Yeah, essentially it's a studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
those are two
the
changes
code now
made,
says,
you know,
excuse me, I'm sorry, this code now says it needs one habitable room.
Mm-hmm. It has to be attached to the primary dwelling, and it can only be one habitable room. That's how code reads right now.
Okay, and how are we addressing that today?
Changing both those.
Yeah.
Okay, do you need a toilet, a shower, a sink?
You can have,
We're not gonna get specific on
you
rooms.
can have more than one room and it can be detached. That's what we're talking
Okay.
about.
Could
So we're gonna
I,
fix that.
could I get a clarification on the two cooking facilities in the same house? Counselor, if you convert your basement to a ADU,
There's
no problem with having 2 cooking things? Okay. Now we know. I know that B&Bs technically are not allowed to have cooking facilities in the guest rooms. So what's the difference?
how do you manage it? You know, I mean, we've already set our rules on B&Bs. So this falls back to code compliance. You know, we can only tell them what they have to do. We don't have anybody that follows up.
Correct. So, just a second, why don't just follow this up? So, a homeowner would have the choice of converting up to 50% of the bedrooms, up to 5, into B&B, or they can convert those rooms into an ADU and have it be a completely separate unit, so they never have to see their B&B guests. And can ADUs be used as B&B?
Why not?
So it'd be,
An apartment building.
you're creating,
Taking a home into
well,
a-
yeah, if you allow
I lived in those once.
an ADU inside your home, and you're allowed to do a B&B in that, in that
Zoning
zone,
district.
couldn't it also be an ADU that is a B&B, but it's a complete little apartment?
So it would still be limited by our codes for lodging. So if it's in a residential zoning district, it can be no more than 30% of the square footage, total square footage of all the buildings on the property, and you have to live in the primary dwelling unit as your main home. If it's in,
If
no,
you're-
yeah, I would say that people have the same freedoms right now to
Yeah.
just now they have to attach them, but they can build an efficiency apartment.
And do that too.
Our code already allows the efficiency apartments in R1, R2, it goes on and on. OR,
So
AC, I don't know, I wrote them down somewhere.
is the commission up to adopting what Commissioner Horns has shared with us from the Anchorage City Code? I think that's kind of gives some flexibility, yet put some boundaries on it. Whichever's more, 900 square feet max, or 40% of the primary dwelling up to 1,200 square feet.
Still seems
I think
pretty
the
big.
size is a little high on that one.
Yeah,
I like the
it's pretty
style.
big.
How it's written,
How it's written is
Right.
nice.
600 up to 800,
Something like that.
I'm not good with these space stuff.
I mean, a 1,200 square foot dwelling, that means that the original house, if I do the math,
We could also kick them to
that's a 3,000 square foot home, and you're talking gross, when you talk gross, you're talking like the garage and basement of the home too, or just the living space? It's probably the garage, and that's what gross is, right? That's what you're gonna, of the gross floor.
Yeah,
That'd
so
be the garage and the basement, so
Yeah.
that's, yeah, so that would be a 1,200 square foot dwelling, or accessory dwelling unit would be like, could be accommodated by a minimum of a 3,000 square foot home.
That's a
What you're
pretty
looking at.
big house.
What if you do like,
But that's up to them, that's on them if they want to do that.
what
I
if you
mean, I wouldn't
do,
want that much, 3,000 square foot
Yeah,
house. I wouldn't
let's
want-
scale it down.
what if you do 6 to 8, 40% and not in R1?
What's that again?
6 to 8, 600 to 800.
Oh, 600 to 800.
Like Anchorage has, 6 to 8,
Max.
no more than 400, no, excuse me, no more than
40%.
40%, and then not in R1.
So if it's written like Anchorage, it would be 600 feet or 40% up to 800.
Yeah.
Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Or 40% of,
Up to 800.
okay.
Not in R1.
Not in R1.
So let's talk about that.
Not
and
in
when, yeah,
R1.
so that, do we want to have then 2 definitions for an attached ADU and a detached ADU? and then allow attached ADUs in R1 so as to not make all of the efficiency apartments currently in R1 now non-conforming.
We would have to do
Yes.
that.
Yes,
You
we'd
would.
have to do that,
Yeah, you're right.
yeah. So in R1, they have to be attached.
Yeah.
And
That's
that,
a great thing.
Is-
We don't want them attached.
Well, attached or
Fair.
They're
inside,
inside,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
internal. It's internal,
But most of those
attached,
houses are bigger.
detached.
I mean,
Those
how
are your
would
three
R1 owners feel
options.
about that?
So the last,
Like it, but then, you know,
They're
they're
gonna
mixed.
change how it is, right?
I think a lot of people on R1 moved into R1 because they wanted to have single family.
Yeah.
I think that's, you know, I think most of those people would like, you know, be able to do that kind of stuff, you know. If you have everybody and their brother, you have to worry about parking, and you have to worry about everything else that's going on in that area as well. I think, I mean, you could certainly have it like a mother-in-law kind of thing for family, I think that's fine. But you can have the same problem we had before with all these B&Bs in these places that we had before. That's why we were looking at limiting a lot of that stuff, you know, because a lot of them are doing VBROs, basically, they're whole house rentals. And we cut that off, but I'm concerned about, especially in R1, you know, because neighbors want to know who's in their area.
Okay. You buy there for a reason. I don't want to start messing up
Yeah.
their
It's just,
spot.
you
So
know,
R1, we're guessing that R1 owners would prefer to not allow detached ADUs in R1.
even just for the visuals, you'd like to, you know.
Does that,
Some,
does that like align with what you've seen from requests? Have you had, do you know if you've received R1 requests for this kind of thing?
The most recent ones were in R2 and Central Business.
Whenever we had meetings that deal with R1, everybody that lives in R1 always comes and talks about how they don't want things to change there.
Yeah,
So that's what I'm basing it off of, just old meetings where people were here.
That's
And
why they
living
vote
in
R1.
R1 myself.
Yeah, well, that's valid. I mean, that's where it should come from, the people. Examples.
But to Courtney's point, the code has already allowed what we called efficiency apartments. And so those are allowed in R1. But they
So one
were
way to think about
inside.
it is like, we're not allowing detached or attached ADUs, like they've already been allowed. So it's not like, is this something we're gonna allow the community to do and everyone's gonna jump at it? No, if
Yeah.
it would have happened organically. So what I like about it is, I agree with the R1 look, having it attached, and to like Christiana's point, and Jeremy showed me actually a good article about ADUs from like the older population. They did a survey, you know, and I don't know the age of like people who live in the zoning district in R1, but this survey was for people 50 and over. They, you know, asked why they would use an ADU. It's a home for a loved one, 84%. Housing for relatives or friends, 83%. Feel safe with someone nearby, 64%. Space for guests, 69%. You know, increase the value of their home, 67%. A place for a caretaker to stay, 60%. And extra income for renting to a tenant, 53%. And I'd view that, and just from some of the older folks who've come to talk to us about renting out their property, like they're not looking to get into the short term, turning things over. It's more like, hey, I just need some, you know, a friend, a family, or some long-term assistance. And so I think having, still allow like an attached ADU for that population to have family,
For sure.
you know,
absolutely.
a
And
caretaker.
not changing, you know, R1,
And so, yeah,
we
we-
argued they don't want changes, so no change there.
We wouldn't really be changing anything for
Right.
R1.
Okay, so we have the new size.
Okay, I just want to clarify also. So we're taking out apartment efficiency.
Correct.
We're going to call it an ADU, and we're going to put these restrictions on it. Of, you know, 600 square feet or 40% up to 800 square feet.
Correct. When I was reading this definition, I kind of stumbled over the located within or on the same property. Seems like located within or on the same property are two different things.
Yeah, it's located within a single-family dwelling or on the same property as a single-family dwelling.
So is that pretty clear to everybody else? Okay.
Which
I
one?
just-
What?
Well, on the page
31C.
12, 31C. So if you read that clearly, then,
I think it's okay.
okay.
Yeah.
So I read it as located within the same property, and that didn't make sense.
But yeah,
So how
I would adjust that definition because we're gonna separate out and have attached ADU and detached ADU, so,
Right.
so
right.
wouldn't, there would be that separation then, which would hopefully clarify that.
Good. Do you think a private entrance is important?
I think we need to.
For the attached.
We need to leave that up to the builder or the owner.
Okay. Let's see.
I'm again wondering how that's gonna square with 1C or 1E on, or adjacent lot. I didn't quite I'm still not understanding that. You said that there's, on the adjacent lot, there's lots out there, like you said, in your neighborhood that are,
Well,
they're
it
owned
says
by,
owned by the same person.
but then when you go to, again,
Yeah, I don't
he
like.
was saying, when you go to sell it, how does that,
It makes something weird like my neighbor.
Right, I know.
You can sell off a part of your, like say if you live on 3 lots, you can decide to, separate out one lot and sell that lot to somebody. And then that then will obviously have to be replatted and the rest, and that lot will ultimately wind up going to that individual to whom you sell for its pain, but you do it. I mean, there's a lot of people who have, in our area, and I live in the old town as well. My next door neighbor has 3 separate lots, and I got a lot and a half. And my other neighbor has a 2.5 lot, so it's
Weird.
my garage is a 1.5 feet over the property line too. So it's all eyeballed back then. But yeah, it's most of the old part of town is nothing's quite, it's sectioned out. It's even like when you talk about that whole area where the Public Works is, that's all divvied up into separate municipal or separate old town lots. I think they're all 30 by 100.
Yep.
The city never redid anything with it. They're gonna, when they redo that whole area, they're gonna have to figure out what they're gonna wanna do with it, make it old town lots.
They
or not.
already did.
well,
Yeah.
if it's on
They
an
already
adjacent,
platted
They did.
if it's on a separate lot, why do you even call it an ADU? Just call it another structure. Wouldn't that give them more freedom, or
That's
is it
what I was
because?
saying. It's a new build.
But they sold it though.
Yeah, it's a primary structure.
It's a primary then.
It's not different. It doesn't matter for the same owner, it's a different lot.
Yeah, but their primary structure could be,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
primary.
it's gotta be, it's just just another
Is-
building they own, right?
Is there regulation about, like, utilities crossing property lines? That's what I'm wondering about,
Yeah.
that's where you get that.
Yeah, are they on a different unit or different
They would have to-
meter?
They would have to.
Be metered different?
Yeah, 'cause they
Right,
can't,
okay,
they can't cross.
Okay.
yeah,
So-
We
so,
already have enough of that in our town.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's already, we're crossing streams all over.
Right.
Yeah.
But another good point to add too is if you do continue down the road of a detached accessory dwelling, do you require new water and sewer? So it's another thing to think about.
What do you think about it?
it's too expensive.
I think they would have to get new water and sewer
Oh my gosh.
because it's no different than feeding a tiny home if you're putting it on your primary or your side lot. They would have to have new power, new electric, new sewer.
If you put it on the same lot or if you put it on a different lot? Or both?
If you put it on a different lot,
For
absolutely.
sure.
But that begs the question though, if you put it on, I mean, like I said, we're talking about some of the sizes of these or,
We also asked
Well,
that.
if you do that, then I would, if I was walking into their office, I would say, I'm building an accessory dwelling unit then, and want to keep it all in the same utility. Otherwise, you are talking a lot of money getting into
Your
that
sewer line might
infrastructure.
not be able to handle that.
What's
Your
that?
sewer line might not be able to handle all that.
well, that's exactly it.
I mean, mine probably would, the old ones in town.
There's
I don't know
old-
if you could put 2 houses on
That's a
one.
concern.
Yeah, there's old tar pipes still underneath there.
Yeah.
Septic.
It's a nightmare.
Is this-
Yeah, mine's cast iron. It's,
So is that not something that
This is
building
not
code already
concrete.
regulates,
yeah, that's
that
true.
Yeah, so many rooms.
you have,
On
No.
new build it does, but not on ADU it doesn't.
so it's not like
But this
so
isn't-
many people are
Yeah.
using this sewer line, you need to put in a new one, no?
Because you own your sewer line to the alley. So you own it personally. So if you put too many on it and cause a problem, that's your problem. So, I mean, by requiring an extra one, you're essentially looking out for somebody
Stressing.
in the future. Same with the water line, but water is probably not the same.
Yeah, I don't know how that would quite fit into
Well, there is a concern too, when you
regulations,
go,
but
yeah, when you go to sell, and then if you're not on a separate sewer line,
Then you
and then there's a clog, and then you're fighting with your neighbor, you have to dig up their, their yard.
Oh, yeah. We've done that.
So you have yours, I'll have mine.
All the base housing on 6th Avenue on the north side of the post office was all wide. All the sewer lines were wide together and then take it to the main.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so one of them was summer home and the other one was having a sewer problem.
Yeah,
And then it wasn't having a sewer problem anymore.
because it was backing up.
Because it was all backing up the toilet up.
Okay, yeah.
So,
I get you. Okay.
no bueno.
So could you summarize your recommendations for a detached ADU regarding utilities?
So I was actually throwing that out as a problem for y'all.
Pass on any question.
So, you know,
That's good.
this is an unenviable position that you're in, you know, to try and come up with these things. But it was just a thought that, you know, I had, if you're, you know, like I did read in some of that stuff, they were requiring new address, new water sewer, you know, cutting them, you know, say 210.5. You know, there's a couple of those in town. But it was just, how far down that rabbit hole do you want to go, you know? So just for clarity, I wanted you guys to know that I read that in there, that is in some of the counties and stuff, so.
So Chair Griswold, sorry, we can follow up with Public Works Director to see if they have
Yeah.
any regulations within their code that would respond to something like this, an additional dwelling unit that's not attached, because this is good, it would be good for us to know. I don't know, I would have to see examples in other cities' code of that requirement, since it seems odd to put it in the land uses allowed portion of code, a utilities requirement. Seems like it would be more appropriate from the Public Works code,
Yep.
but
Right,
But
Yep.
right.
when it's a separate lot, they have to have their own utilities. So if they build on a lot they own next to them, they have to have their own utilities. If they build on their own lot,
Right, then they.
requiring utilities is just helping them out in the future. Because if they have a problem, that's really their problem, because they own the sewer line and the water line to the hookups. So if anything goes wrong on that, they have to take care of it. So we can either look out for them in the future and make them pay more now, or let them deal with their future, and it could cost a lot more then.
Well, it just causes a lot of consternation with neighbors and, yeah, like you said, the future thing, so.
I mean, it would prevent a lot of ADU construction, right? That's a lot more money when you have to have your own water and sewer. Right? I don't know much, but
Yeah, it is.
I would think people would be like, well, we can't do that.
I'm picturing extension cords and garden hoses. We borrow your toilet. You know, we don't want that.
And if it's on their lot, they're not going to be able to split it up and cause a problem like so many other areas have. You know, my neighbor's water line goes through my yard.
Right.
But if we were on the same lot, they wouldn't come to us and say, "Can I split these up?" We'd be like, and they're all tied together, or that's not large enough to be split up.
Right.
So if it's not large enough to be split up, and they feel like rolling the dice with their sewer, I don't know if that's our problem.
You're talking about like in an R1
Yeah.
situation.
Well,
Well, that would be attached anyway, but.
some of this is not Title 15, but it's really interesting to have a bigger understanding of what's involved if you want to build a small
Sure.
unit on your property.
Yeah, we can talk to Doug and just give him
Yeah.
a heads up that potential changes.
Yeah, you
and
don't-
let's let him run with that and figure
See,
that,
yeah.
see if he has some advice or feedback or.
It's the right hand knowing what the left hand's doing, or vice versa. It's important.
When we,
Okay.
just for administration real quick, when we, if we were to split in the future, if somebody had a larger piece of property with 2 homes on it, and it's, well, one of these, and they wanted to split it and sell the other half, would we look into how the utilities run from that?
Wait a minute, you're talking the same lot? and a-
Yeah, if they had a larger lot.
A detached?
If they, essentially, if they had
A
2 lots.
detached?
Yep, and they had it detached, and then they
One lot
wanted
or
to
2
split the lot. They had 2 30 by 100s, and they had their home on one, and they built an accessory dwelling on the other one. And then years down the line, if they wanted to split it, and if all the setbacks were fine, would we look into where the utilities went before we decided that? Because if we didn't look into it, then we'd potentially split it with them using the same line.
Yeah, that wouldn't be anything that we would regulate, or would be
Okay.
anything that we could tell the owner you can't do that because of where the utilities are
Okay,
placed.
that's what I was wondering.
There would be some challenges for them, I think, with their loan
Yeah,
and
actually, they probably would be able to get a loan.
other things like that, but it wouldn't be anything that
Okay,
we could flag.
yeah, that's what I was wondering.
He's just trying to prevent the nightmare that he has. And many other residents in Seward. It's like, guess what? You can't build anything permanent because your neighbor's sewer line goes right under there, on your property. So, yeah, it's nice to prevent those problems. But Title 15 and subdivisions, maybe subdivisions would have a little bit to say about that. Development requirements, which we would advise the borough about. But, so did we give you some guidance on a revised definition to get rid of efficiency apartment, which was really confusing because it's not really an apartment in an apartment building?
Yeah, I think we have
So
some
much
good
to
information for
consider.
next step.
Yeah, so much to consider.
Okay.
Any other considerations that you'd like to enlighten the administration with?
I
Thanks for
just
that
wonder
research.
if, I've been hearing a little buzz about the allowable lot coverage. I mean, if you have a larger lot, can there be any thought given to, allowing the bill to go more than 35%? Because what it's forcing people to do is go up rather than, say, do something that's more handicap friendly or and just be a 1-story.
I think that's a different topic.
It is, but, okay.
That would be
So-
under
docket for
the
later.
purview of Title 15 under development requirements, and so it's something you all can discuss, but.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there that it's of interest, because there's a lot of the lots I know in Clearview, they're big lots, and they could have a bigger footprint and be more useful than just going up.
Does anyone wish to stretch your legs?
Let's take a break.
Yes.
Take a break.
Stand up?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come back at 8:23. How's that? Stand up.
Claire, can you help me with this? I wanna get
Oh, what were you saying? Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, we're back in session. Our next topic is building height. And would administration like to give a little overview of building height, please?
Yeah, so the recommendations here are to change, under development requirements, the little excerpt about building height, the reason, the purpose for building height. So we've scratched that it was to prevent loss of life through the inability of the city fire department to reach upper stories or roofs, because Jeremy's no longer here, but Chief Kreitz spoke to it a couple work sessions past too, that building code is in place to address buildings that are taller than the fire truck can access. So that's not really a valid reason, but the reason that seems to be why we have a building height is to maintain the small town character of Seward and to preserve the scenic view. So we added that to just clarify that. And then from the discussion we had the last work session, as well as some input from the comprehensive plan update land uses allowed survey, which we put in the packet on page 20 and 21. We asked the community what they thought was an appropriate height for buildings in Seward. And 55% said 3 stories, 21% said 1 to 2 stories, 9% said 4 stories, 3% said 5 stories, and then 8% said other, and the other comments are written on page 21. So based on that feedback, as well as the feedback from our last work session, we changed the land use, or are proposing to change the land uses allowed table for the maximum building height from 34 feet to 38 feet, which would accommodate more comfortably a 3-story building, both residential and commercial. The commercial ones, of course, needing a little bit more footage and space for all the utilities they have to put in between the floors, and that sort of thing. And then on page 19, the only other proposed edit or addition to code would be note 9, that in the R3, UR, OR, AC, CB, HC, excluding the area specified in note 1, and industrial zoning districts, a conditional use permit may be granted to an individual to construct a building up to 50 feet in height. And that was also based on the feedback from developers that you need an elevator for a 3-story building, and the cost to put in an elevator is quite excessive. So to make it financially viable, a 4-story building would be much more appealing and make apartment complexes more doable here. To have the ability to go to 4 stories, since they have to put in an elevator for a 3-story anyway. So that's the reason for that. But and also making it a conditional use permit rather than picking a zoning district is because our zoning districts are so intermingled that it would be hard to say, all right, auto commercial, we're okay having a building because auto commercial is right down here and down the Seward Highway. So a conditional use permit seemed more appropriate, where the commission could evaluate each situation separately based on the location and say whether or not, you know, a 50-story building would be appropriate or not. Or, I mean, not that every CUP would be 50 stories, but, you know, a building higher than 38 feet up to 50.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. I have a question for our building inspector who has returned. If that reasoning for 34 feet was because the fire department couldn't reach higher, would buildings need to be built to commercial construction with fire sprinkler system, 2-hour rated ceiling, and rated egress paths?
Yes,
Mhm.
all commercial buildings.
And what about residential?
Residential, no.
If they went higher than 34 feet, they would,
Yes, they would, actually.
okay.
The residential code only covers 1 and 2 family dwellings up to 3-story.
And what is the definition there for a 3-story building?
3 stories above grade plane,
3 stories above grade
which
point.
is also lowest level of fire department access.
I mean,
It's really hard. So when I was researching how many feet is a story, a 3-story building is around 33 to 40 feet high. Does that sound about right? And so if someone builds above 34 feet, they would need the commercial sprinkler system and fire rated sheetrock and all that,
Once it goes over 3 stories.
over 3 stories.
Yeah,
Okay.
so not necessarily.
I have a quick question is, if you have a full basement, is that one lower basement considered any, because that's okay. So is a full daylight basement like, or anything else like this, is that considered part of the calculation?
No.
Okay.
And going over 3, is that 3 and over, or is that 4?
That's 4.
That's 4, okay.
Up to 3.
So 3 is fine, and then above that is where you need your sprinklers and additional fire rated materials.
So the grade comes in where the fire department would seek the highest grade, like not the basement where it was daylight basement, they go the higher one, and then they could reach up to 34 feet, but anything higher than that would have to be protected.
And then after 4 stories, the building code and the fire code start to get increasingly more stringent.
What are the thoughts of the commission? Do you have questions for the building inspector?
well, I'm wondering where did this 50 feet, why is that, why did that come about? And that's just,
Yeah, I don't like to.
That's came from the input from the developers at their last work session, that a 4-story building would fit within 50 feet to not have to make some weird configurations and costly adaptations.
for the elevators.
Yeah.
Well,
The
and,
three-
and yeah, and just like all the piping and stuff they have to put in between the floors and that sort of thing.
I get the
50
impression,
feet's too high. I mean, keep in consideration, I was only a 1.5 person's opinion.
I think it's primarily because it was 50 feet or, whatever, because in order to, if you had more than 3 stories, you had to put in an elevator, and to make the elevator cost effective, you have to have a whole nother floor in order to help cover for all of that, for all the clients. I'm assuming this is a hotel or kind of setup, and then you need to have that additional space for all the support apparatus, fire, the fire suppression stuff and everything else that goes above that, and that's why the 50 sort of rolled in. Got
I
it.
think I remember them saying that if the elevator is expensive, so going up one more floor
Well,
doesn't make the elevator any
Yeah.
much more expensive, and it also gives you more rooms to make more money on.
They'll pay for it, yeah.
And it's relevant to apartment complexes too.
Yeah.
So that's where the housing help comes in, to be able to entice, for a developer to want to do an apartment building, 4 stories, we're guessing would really,
Yeah.
make them more interested because they can make more money. So
True.
that's kind of
And that's why we put this in here, and like I said at the last meeting, this is more a starting point for the conversation, not that you've all said this is what you want.
Yeah.
But Tom and John were here last time to give kind of more of the commercial hotel side of things. We reached out to a couple developers that Jason had worked with in the past, and some of the feedback they'd given us was like, if you're gonna build apartments, you're not gonna get people to do it unless it's probably 4 stories. And so if you have areas in town that the town would be willing to go up, that would be your best bet for getting apartment complexes built. So,
What about 2 stories? Like, it seems that's better than 3, and you don't have the elevator. Like, if you had a big enough where you could But I guess there just isn't the lot size
Space.
to do a big, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then part of apartments just have a longer return on investment, so
Right.
you
we
can,
don't have cornfields to bulldoze.
It's interesting to see that most of the town, at least for the response to your survey, still are amenable to the 3 stories, over half. It's interesting.
Having this info in the packet is awesome.
Mhm.
You know, like to be able to pull from the survey, the graph, huge, and the quotes I love too. You know, it's just like, these are Sewardites, they're quotes. I really like that. You know, maybe people can't get to meetings, but it's just a way to get public input that you're getting. So thanks for
and
for
people are
going through that.
like thinking through it pretty well. If you read the comments of those others, a lot of them are like, talking about different zoning districts or different areas of
Oh,
town.
yeah, they're on it,
We'd be
yeah.
okay, not in certain areas like here, obviously, but, so, yeah, it's kind of cool to see the surveys in action.
I wouldn't be opposed to higher buildings in areas, but I wouldn't want to just leave them to a zoning like OR. I would like a special zoning district. You know, this particular area, so it's not all ORs, because we have some of these spots that are just like sprinkled around. Our zoning is not clean like it should be, and so there are potential for, I can think of a couple lots that could go a lot higher based on if we change this with their zoning, yet they're in the midst of homes, single-family homes. And I don't trust conditional use permits enough to make that happen, because I've seen it go backwards multiple times. So I'm uncomfortable going high like that unless we have a specific zone for it, which then I'd be okay with, like across the bay.
Not zone, area,
Well,
right?
zoning district.
Overlay.
I guess, yeah, like,
Overlay, would an
Yeah,
overlay
okay.
work?
yes, thank you for that. Like across the bay.
So the commission could sit down with a map and basically
Mhm. Yeah.
draw circles or squares around the areas that they felt a 50-story building would be okay.
Yeah, 50 foot.
50 foot.
50 foot, not
50
50
story.
story.
50-story
Wow.
building.
Man, go
Yeah.
big or go home.
Yeah, not 50 story. 50
The Courtney complex.
That's based on just view shed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's
it
gonna
is.
get the top floor, so she gets the best view shed.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But I mean, I think we do have a few areas that a larger building could fit in, but I want to make sure that it just doesn't get snuck into somewhere where it shouldn't be.
So the Glacier View Apartments, that's a 3-story building, right? Of course,
so.
and that's,
3, 4, 3.
so
believe it's
some,
3.
like that area back there, I could see them going 4 stories.
It's up
May
against
not
the
be a
mountain,
problem.
yeah.
It's up against the mountain, but it's also tucked away,
Yeah,
so you don't really
really safe.
see it.
Yeah.
However, the people living on the other side of Glacier View have no view, no sun, no nothing. They're completely blocked off from the sun.
Well,
It's up
nobody-
the canyon anyway.
Nobody does there.
Well,
On the west side, we built
That's
Stewart
why
on the
they-
wrong side of the
they,
of the
no,
bay.
they savor the little sun they get, but that building completely eliminates it. And it would be true for everybody. You got your little house on your 30 by 100, and then there goes a 3-story building. There goes your privacy, your sunshine, your view. It's just shocking to think that would happen. When I walk around Seward or drive around or bike around, it just seems that we are, fortunately, mostly very modest homes. They're mostly 1.5 stories, maybe 2 stories. They're not giant homes. They're just scale. I think of the hotel, the harbor. What's the one on
Gateway?
Wood Avenue?
Hotel Sur
Harbor View?
or Harbor?
Harbor View. Yeah, it's 2 stories. It has beautiful landscaping, huge trees, roses in the front, and a nice drive. You drive in and you don't see the parking lot. It's just really well done. I really like it.
Yeah, Jerry
It
and
blends in
Jolene
with the
King did a great
neighborhood.
job with that.
What's that?
That was Jerry and Jolene King. They did a great job
Yes,
with that.
they did. And it just fits in so nicely. And then I think, okay, now a 50-foot building, it just sets my nerves on edge to think of a giant building in our small town. I would consider the overlay, and try to find a place where that would fit. But I'm thinking in our tiny downtown area, anything you build that big is in the way.
I don't think there's any room for building anything that big.
Oh, you'd be surprised what a bulldozer could do.
Well, yeah, sure.
Gotta worry about.
Right, but to have it by these zones, our zones are so tight together,
Yeah.
and suddenly you look out your alley and there's a giant building because they're in a different zone where it's allowed.
I think across the bay is a good idea to start, for sure.
Yeah,
When you look at your city and there's a housing crisis, you know, it doesn't, it's not a visual, but that's occurring. So I think this is, you know, building height is a chance to address the housing crisis. You're hopeful. So that's why I'm open to certainly like looking at specific areas.
Yeah.
Well, what about what's being proposed here? Going from 34 to 38 to just
Yes.
guarantee the third story. Like, how do we feel about that?
Why can't, so the elevator shaft is 38 feet enough to accommodate 3 stories, or is, I was asked by one builder to suggest 40 just for roof line stuff. I don't know if it has to actually be permanent building space, but, you know, that there be some accommodations for aesthetics on the roof, so it's not just a flat roof.
That already has it in it, because right now we're 34 feet from the mean roof peak of the triangle.
Okay.
So that means you're already above 34 feet when you get your roof on.
Okay.
So if we go to 38, that's what I wanted to address, is if we go to 38, are we still measuring from the mean peak? Because then all of a sudden we're
40-something.
45, potentially. I'd have to calculate it, so don't hold me to that number. But we're higher than we
Jeremy might
might.
know.
How, 45?
Yeah, if you'd still be calculating from the mean peak.
Yeah. I'm not good at math, so I just guessed.
Even though it's not part of the main
Uh-huh.
structure.
Yeah. So we gotta be careful on how we pick this, because unless we change that mean, because then, I mean, I like going a full 3 stories where people have ceilings that are high enough to live in and be comfortable and have the proper fire safety equipment
Yeah.
inside the ceiling, and making it so developers can do that efficiently for an apartment. But I also want to make sure we remember that by going the way we're going with how we do it, we'll end up with buildings larger than we think we're going to get.
So all of the examples of other communities in Alaska that we pulled from, it looks like their general minimum height for buildings was 35 feet.
Is that from the mean, you know, is that peak, or is that the measuring, the standard measurement thing?
Yeah, it would be from the mean roof line.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's the big difference between 34 feet and 35 feet? Is that significant, to go from 34 feet to 35?
Not my world.
Right.
But like, is it significant to a builder? Like, does it make it easier for them?
I don't know if one fits enough.
How about 2?
38.
38 is what they were discussing, yeah.
Well,
4 more.
So
Maybe.
it's still objective as well too, because you could have a flat roof and you could have a building for, say, the top of the staircase, which has got a small footprint and a small little roof, and that isn't counted towards the height. So that still falls at the roof line.
Yeah, it's like a housing on the roof, right?
Yeah,
To
14
accommodate
feet
that.
It looks like a little porta potty.
Yeah,
off
right.
the top of the roof.
Right.
That's not
That's not
countable towards the
Right.
height.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Flat roofs and
That-
sewers.
remember,
That's
it's
what I
going to
was-
be higher.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It
With
will
our,
all be higher than 38.
Yeah.
Well, the
None of them will be
34s,
38.
the 34s
Yeah, but
now
not-
are higher than 34 then.
Exactly, yeah.
So what we're seeing, yes, it's relative. It's going to be 4 feet higher than what we're seeing now, the highest buildings.
Roughly.
I'm for making it 40 feet.
I'm for making it 35 at the max.
I do 30.
Well, I don't think, again, that
Well, Tom's
that's
example
not
with his
gonna
trouble with the
accommodate
gateway,
the
I thought
third
was
story
powerful with the hotel,
very well.
you know?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that you want to be able to share, because you want to elevate the roof, or elevate the, whatever, the roof, to be able to accommodate things. So, you know, I don't know his minimum amount, whether it's an apartment or whether it's a hotel, I got the impression was 38, because we want to make it utilitarian
38.
enough.
He said his number. Was it 38 or 37?
think he said 38,
38?
as I recall.
Because
He
architects
said, in
were
his
like-
first meeting, he said 50 for a 4-story, and then I followed up. I was like, if you do the math, that's like 37 and a half, 38. And I was like, is that compute? And he said yes. And then when we kind of followed up with like Jeremy and some of the developers, yeah, there's no like set amount. But,
Yeah.
like 38
It's safe to get all
is
this
a
stuff.
safe for a true 3-story
He
building.
was being a negotiator,
Yeah.
like to start high and.
It seemed like that would have helped him at the beginning with that 4 feet.
Yeah.
You know, so we make this change, let's say, and then developers see, oh, they went from 34 to 38. Huh, Seward. Now we can maybe pursue that project, you know, that's what could occur.
Yeah. That's a,
Yeah.
What's that?
Of another hotel.
Yeah,
remember, they're only for
or-
hotels.
That's what it is.
I mean, it could be an
That's
apartment complex, you know, if you had a big enough
Thinking
spot.
about that.
With some other program worked in where maybe there's a benefit, you know, we see this like Juno example, I think is great, where you can earn bonus points for certain type of builds you do. So this is one way to entice a builder to address the housing crisis. And then we kind of couple it in, we're not gonna talk about tonight, but like, you know, you try to go with like a program that's gonna reward a developer for building the type of building, say a apartment complex that helps our housing crisis. You kind of couple a few things, and then suddenly developers like, oh, okay, we can make money doing this build that just makes money, and it also happens to help provide homes.
It's not a nightmare to build either.
Yeah.
So it's easier.
Yeah, make it more enticing for, yeah, and then bring in some other angle to make it more enticing to build the kind of homes that are homes, you know, to help with the housing crisis, is what I see potential with building height, you know, coupled with some other things.
But also in the overlay district, put those in that specific area, so we control it in the.
Yeah, for the big, I think you go, I would support now going to 38. I mean, the 50, that's a whole nother story, yeah.
Yeah.
Overlay against the mountain, that would be a whole, yeah, really looking at what that would
we
look
do
like.
an overlay with the CUPs if you want to like really have
Yeah.
eyes on it. Because like Courtney mentioned, it's like 35 feet is like kind of where it starts with the other towns, but the ones that have 35 feet all have some sort of like condition to go above it. The ones that don't, are like Whittier and Valdez, theirs is 40.
What about an overlay for 38? So we have our 34, that's normal for places like down by the water, or I'm trying to think of any laws, it could be something, but, and then a section that maybe is 38, and then a section that's higher. 2 overlays.
Or you can do, 38 feet in R3,
In
like
places
the
that-
zoning districts where you would want to encourage apartments or something.
Yes, and where its negative impact for view would be minimal.
Yeah, that's the
To
key.
minimize it, I guess I should say, and have 3 different, because a lot of these other cities have, it's not just, I guess there was the one that was flat across the board, but, you know,
Yeah,
they vary.
different heights.
Like, why do we have to be flat across the board? Why can't we pick where useful buildings can go, but keep them out, large buildings, keep them out of places where either people don't want them, because the majority of people said they didn't want above 3-story. And a good number said they didn't even want 3-story. So if we keep that large building out of those areas, but still have an area somewhere else that larger buildings can go, we can have our cake and eat it too.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, 7 people did want 3 stories, right? 55% here said
Yeah,
3
3
stories.
stories. 3 stories was maxed out. Yeah, 55.
But it would be interesting to, I don't know,
No,
see
many.
what 3 stories means to them.
True.
I would like that, because I think we do need to have full 3 stories so developers can get
Yeah,
their money
we
out of
need
the building,
to
but also so
accommodate
people can
that.
have larger than a 7-foot roof, ceiling, I should say.
Right, more
Nobody wants to live
comfortable.
like that.
Yeah, even that is like a more enticing building project. It's like a nicer home, you know?
Let's double over that.
Double
Yeah.
over.
It's a good thing for us to look at.
Do we use overlays yet with stuff?
We have a historical district overlay,
Okay.
but no regulations currently that go with that overlay.
Yeah, because I would be fine with, you keep your 34, you go to 38, or whatever the next one is, and then the higher one, you do a conditional use on top of that one.
Here's where you can do
Yeah.
force whatever the number
With
is,
somebody-
4 stories, let's say. That seems like maybe the key.
or, whatever, what numbers, yes.
Yeah,
And then the larger one does need a conditional use.
yeah.
But the mid one in those areas doesn't.
But, someone who's interested could look and be like, okay,
Yeah, I
it's
can do that.
possible, I could maybe do this here. Interesting, yeah.
Yes.
As this bigger conversation continues to unfold, I would like to bring to light, as we talk about the possibility of apartments, especially going across the bay, that we consider equitable accessibility to services. It's out to mile 6.5, it's a $30 taxi ride to downtown. And so I do, as you're, making these overlays and discussing districts and possible builds and et cetera, just remembering equitable accessibility to services for people who may be habitating those apartments.
I would hope the market would address that, because we can't do that in our code. But if there's a need, the market should address
Yeah,
it.
but I mean, like, if, you go the route of like conditional use permits to like add an additional, that possibly is a consideration for the developer. I mean, I would hope that the developer would consider that, but across the bay is far from the services available here in Seward. So,
Far in our terms.
Right.
right.
It's not very far.
Well, this is an interesting point, so across the bay, but what about on this side? What could be, we're getting
I'm
down.
gonna throw a map down.
Yeah, but there could be options on this side, right? Like this example, this public, west of First or Second Avenues or north of Fort Avenue, a 4-story apartment building, so, yeah, I mean, we look at that with the overlay.
Or what
but-
by, what if, like Sea Lion Avenue, right by the
right,
Chugachmute, or
Mhm.
back in,
Somewhere.
where the new Public Works building is gonna eventually go.
That'd be, yeah, if that exercise isn't too hard, that'd be interesting to take a look at a
About what you
potential
think we had
overlay,
that
like
area.
identifying spots where
see
taller
what-
buildings could work,
Can we bring it back for another one with a big map and have time to think about?
So, that's right there.
That'd
Oh,
be
I
good.
know. I
A
know.
lot.
We have one more work session before.
Yeah, we've done this before, we've
joint.
laid
What
out
do
the
we-
map and drew around, we sure did.
Yeah.
We did
So-
that. Yeah.
I will say, I've kind of framed this as like, hey, let's get our ducks in a row to present to council. We can also, don't have to go to council, hey, our set overlay districts, you could present this conversation and see, get feedback from them.
Do they like the
Yeah,
idea?
do they like the idea? And that would like save us time from like cramming in.
True.
This is,
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
So we go.
And we can think about it meanwhile too.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm sure there'd be an opinion on
But
that.
so we set the January work session topics already,
Yeah.
which were priorities, and then going through the municipal land plan for potential housing opportunities with city-owned land, and that could be a good start to that overlay. So, all right, let's look at
Yeah.
like what are current city-owned properties that could potentially be used for
And
an
almost
apartment
like
complex.
maybe a little both of drawn on the map.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Okay.
So is that enough direction for you?
Is that good?
Any other comments about building height or anything else?
I don't think so.
Are we just done?
I hope so.
Is everyone done?
I think so.
What, under 3 hours?
Okay,
We should
If
have added
you're
one more
sure.
topic.
I am.
I'm gonna adjourn the meeting at 8:53 PM.
Okay.
Happy